Yes, I got caught out late.
Okay, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those watching online. Just at the very beginning, before I give the formal announcements, particularly for members of the Planning Committee, just to let you know that Stephen has left and will not be our clerk of the Planning Committee any longer. For tonight, we welcome Gabriella, but we await a new, more permanent member of the clerk for the Planning Committee. So wish him well where he's gone. Housekeeping. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green, where officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. I would like to advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Speakers using the microphones in the middle may be picked up by cameras recording the meeting, and any members of the public in the gallery behind the speakers may be picked up by those cameras and have their image captured. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to move or leave the meeting. Can I just check, does anyone intend to film or record audio of the meeting? Thank you. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 5D, Councillor Crittenden, myself, and item 5, can't remember, we've had some last minute changes. Whatever it is Councillor Pugh. RO8, Councillor Pugh. Would any other members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 please announce it now?
Would I need to, Chair, as I'm on the committee, but to introduce the 5A A01? Because I called it in, that's all. Just to give reason.
Sorry, Councillor Wright, just to confirm, is it that you wish to speak under 20.1, therefore you'd have to leave the chamber and not discuss it?
No, I was literally just going to give reasons for calling it in.
Oh, fine. Well, that can come during the debate.
Okay,
that's fine.
Thank you for throwing me yet again. Right, so the following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Item 5A, Upton County Primary School, Edge End Road, Broadstairs, and item 5I, Kent House Nursing Home, Fairfield Road, Broadstairs. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Matterface, substituted by Councillor Everett. Do I have any other apologies? No, thank you. Agenda item 2, recusals and declarations of interest. Due to my ward councillor involvement, I will be recused for items 5C and 5D. Do I have any declarations of interest? Thank you. I have Councillors Everett, Bright, Kay Bright, Alban and Keane. And can I come back to you, Jay Bright, in a moment? I understand, can you just confirm your reason?
I'm going to declare a significant interest in items 5F and 5G as they are Thanet District Council applications, and I am the leader of the council.
Councillor Alban?
Yes, same reason, Chair, but as a cabinet member.
Thank you. Councillor Keane? Thank you. Councillor K-Bright?
The same, but also I'd like to declare an interest on 5E A05 as Councillor Nichols is my next door neighbour.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor J. Bright, is that yours?
Yes, it is, yeah. Item 5E. Thank you.
Thank you. You will be advised when to leave the chamber. Okay, so agenda item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee held on over the 4th and 5th of September. Do members agree that minutes of both Planning Committee meetings held on the 4th and 5th of September 2024 be approved as a correct record? Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposed by Councillor Alban, seconded by Councillor Rattigan. Sorry, thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 18th of September 2024. Do members agree that minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 18th of September 2024 be approved as a correct record? And can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Moore, are you proposing?
No, Chair, the minutes aren't correct.
Okay, thank you. Can just bear with us while we come back to you. Just getting the minutes up. Can you just confirm what the corrections are, please?
My apologies seem to be missing.
Yeah, okay, we can amend that. That will be updated. Thank you. So apart from that, does everyone agree that the members are a correct record? And can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Keane and Councillor J. Bright. Does everyone agree? Thank you. The planning point of information, the planning applications manager will outline a point of information on item 5I, Kent House.
Thank you, Chair. On the application at Kent House, a condition has been omitted to require landscaping, including the planting of 4 trees, to be carried out prior to the occupation of the premises, and therefore the following condition is proposed to be added to the list of conditions under the officer recommendation. So the condition would read, prior to the occupation of the building for the use hereby approved, full details of soft landscaping works to include species, size and precise location of new trees, shrubs, hedges and grassed areas to be planted as shown on the approved block plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. All soft landscaping works shall be carried out in accordance with the approved details prior to the first occupation of the building or in accordance with the programme of works to be agreed in writing with the local planning authority. Following completion of the landscaping works, photographic evidence of implementation shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in order to verify the works have been completed in accordance with the approved plans and to enable the full discharge of this condition. Any trees or plants which within a period of 5 years from the completion of the development die, are removed or become seriously damaged or diseased shall be replaced in the next planting season with others of a similar size and species as those originally planted, unless written approval to any variation is approved by the local planning authority. And the ground for that condition is in the interests of visual amenity to the area and to adequately integrate the development into the environment in accordance with policies QDO2 and GI04 of the Thanet local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday the 1st of November 2024. Moving on to the items for discussion. First thing is we do have a change of order and the first item we're going to consider is RO8 47 to 49 C Road. I have Councillor Pugh speaking under section 20.1. You have 3 minutes, Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for agreeing to move this forward. Members, I've called in this application to be decided by the committee, namely for a number of reasons, but I'm sure officers will explain that this application and this site and the redevelopment of this site has been an ongoing saga for a number of years. Whilst the site is included within a conservation area in Westgate, there's many reasons for why officers may give for this application to be refused that I'll be honest, I don't agree with, and I think too long of a significant time has gone on, that many of them don't carry the same weight as they did when the scheme was consented in 2010 and an amended scheme was consented in 2016. Namely, the reason for there being less parking on site than was originally consented, 14 less parking spaces. There's ample parking on Sea Road. As a council now, and our policy for some schemes is to push for schemes to be car-free, as we're trying to encourage residents, new and old, to use more sustainable forms of transport. So I don't believe that because there's less parking necessarily on site now, that would be a reason to not grant permission for this retrospective application. Similar as well is that whilst there may not be free electric charge points that are included specifically within this site, to the rear of the site there are 4 new houses being built, and electric charging points are being installed within that development there. So within the wider area of what was this development, when these apartments were being converted from the former care home, within the entire site there will be electric charge points. There have been reasons why this retrospective application should be refused, amply that there are no longer, or there aren't wall tiles, vertical, horizontal, whatever you want to call them, wall tiles. Material costs over the last 5-6 years have risen substantially, and whilst the walls have been rendered and some of the walls to the top of block 3 and block 2 have been painted in what I would admit is quite a bright green and blue colour, I understand from the applicant that he's more than happy to redo these and to redo the exterior, but it's more that he's been waiting for the conclusion of this saga before committing funding and finances to the exterior of the property. I would ask the committee to grant permission for this retrospective application, but if you can't, I would ask that you delegate to officers to go back and negotiate with the applicant so that we can bring this forward. There's many reasons for why we should be supporting people who want to redevelop what then become brownfield sites, particularly in our coastal areas. And whilst it may be argued that this development will no longer sit in keeping with the rest of the area, I can assure you that anyone on West Bay is probably more focusing on looking at the sea than they are looking back at what's behind them, and all of the buildings that were former care homes that have been converted into flats. Thank you.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the site in Sea Road. So the buildings that form part of this application are the 2 buildings towards the centre of the site, outlined in red. So the site as a whole was this wider area which originally incorporated the 4 buildings. The 2 buildings either side were existing buildings that were converted, and the 2 buildings forming part of this application were new build development towards the centre of the site. The original application also included a terrace of houses to the rear, and that area of land has now been sold off and is now been developed separately. So the site itself now is just the area at the front, which consists of these 4 buildings. So this is just an aerial view of the 4 buildings in this location here. So you can see Sea Road wrapping around here, and you can see the orientation of these buildings and the fact there's quite a big bend on Sea Road at this point of the road. And then just a closer up view of that. So you can see to the front is the parking area serving the units, and then this area to the rear is the area that's now been sold off and is being developed for 4 dwellings. So the application is to retain the buildings as they've been constructed. So this is a long-running application. It originally was approved in 2010. A variation was then approved in 2016, which removed some basement parking, so it reduced the parking levels down. And then the development was constructed, but it hasn't been constructed in accordance with the plans from 2016. So in 2019, an application was submitted for approval of the development as it was built, but concerns were raised with particular elements which I'll go through, and therefore amendments were made suggesting that following that approval they would have to carry out some works to make the buildings acceptable. Those haven't been carried out, and therefore this application is again just for the buildings as as erected. So it's these two buildings in the centre of the slide here. So the building off to the left was the converted building. There were a few alterations to those two buildings, the one on the left and the one on the right as well, when they were carried out. But the amendments were so minor that we approved those changes under a non-material amendment. So the buildings to the left and the right here, which were converted, have planning permission, and so they're fine. So it's just these two central buildings, which are the new builds, that we're considering. So this is just, again, some views of it. So you can see this is a access point running through. So this runs around the back of the building and down to a basement area where there's an area for cycle parking. And again, you can see the two wheels here. So one of the concerns is the render and the fact that this building is almost fully grey, apart from a bright area at the gable at roof level here. And again, this building is also grey render with some green cladding at dormer level here, although there is some brick within this gable frontage. So concerns are the materials and the fact there's a very limited mix and a lack of tile hanging to the frontage, which was originally approved. And so again, just seeing this, so again, seeing it in relation to the one that's been converted, again, you can see the fact that there is the tile hanging to the frontage of that building. And you can see that these are three-storey, part two-storey, part three-storey buildings. This is a three-storey and this is three-storey, but some accommodation has been created at roof level to create a four-storey unit. So again, one of the concerns that I'll talk about later is to do with this element here at roof level and the fact that there's a large balcony area at roof level here with French doors, which is sort of accentuating the height of a four-storey building. So again, then just looking across now to the right-hand side, so again, this was the converted building, which again had the non-material amendment, and therefore that area now that building has planning permission. And then just again, some wider views of these buildings. So again, this was the converted one. These are now the neighbouring properties. So you can just see the scale of this building in relation to the others. So whilst there's quite a few of them are three-storey, you can see this is actually quite a tall building in relation to the neighbouring buildings. So this gable was approved, so it is expected that there would be four-storey within it, but the concern is this area here. So again, just showing the buildings in the context of the surrounding conservation area. And now this is within the site, looking at the parking area. So with the original application, when it was approved for the 48 dwellings initially, which included the houses at the rear, it was approved with 48 parking spaces. Then as the applications have moved on, the basement parking, as I said, was removed, and we ended up having 30 spaces, parking spaces approved for 32 flats across the four buildings. So there's 14 units within the two central buildings, but 32 units across the four buildings, and it was approved with 30 parking spaces. This application is looking to retain this parking area to the rear as it currently is, which is only for 14 spaces. So again, this is showing the parking at the front. This is another structure that's been erected, which is we're currently reviewing under enforcement. So that again wasn't part of the original plan and has been erected recently. This is the rear elevation of the central building. So this is block 2 and block 3 here. So you can see they're not fully finished at the back here. It looks like this ground floor unit here is still not occupied. And then this is just showing an access road that would be running down to the basement area. And again, you can see that there's some refuge here. So there was quite a few conditions added on to the 2019 application requiring details of the refuse storage to be provided, and quite a few of these conditions haven't been complied with. So the refuse storage area is supposed to be at the front, require between blocks 2 and 3, and we require details of the screenings coming for that, and that hasn't happened. So it appears, I mean, I'm not, there's no confirmation of this, but it appears that this is currently where the refuse storage may be being located, in the access that runs around to the rear of the site. And then this runs down to the basement level, and you can see there's 2 garage sort of doors here, but on the actual plans have been submitted for the proposal, it's not actually including any basement parking, just cycle parking within these areas. So whilst the applicant has said there is some parking there, looking at what's actually on site, it doesn't look like you could easily access that by a car because of the fact that the access road is blocked. And as I said, it's not actually shown on the proposed plans either. So this is the layout as existing. So you can see this is where there are the parking arrangement as it is at the moment. So there's 3 access points onto Sea Road. So the plan that was previously approved for the 30 spaces removed this this vehicular access here, so that you would have an area that comes in, around and out at this point here, which would have increased the amount of parking to the frontage. But again, I've got that plan to show you later. So this was the approved basement area for the units. This was the showed that there was some partial parking within the basement area. And this is the proposed plan, which shows that this area now is just for cycle parking, so the vehicular parking has been removed. And then just to quickly go through the floor plans, this was the previously approved floor plans and then the proposed plans of ground floor level for both of the blocks. So between the 2016 and 2019 application, there was an infill area that was added between these buildings, so a glazed area. So that's now been added to the plans, but that then was approved through the 2019 application to allow for ease of access between the 2 blocks. And then also the approved first floor plan and the proposed first floor plan, and then the second floor plan, and then that's the proposed second floor plan. And then this is at roof level. So this area here is the area of concern at roof level of block 3, where there's now, it was approved with windows and dormers in this area, but now it's proposed with French doors going into this area and a balcony in this location here. So just looking at the elevation plans then, so this is showing the front elevation. So again, this was the original approval from 2016. Then this was the approval from 2020. So there was quite a big difference between the 2016 and 2020 approval. Again, as they constructed it without permission, there was quite big changes to the roof design. When you see the side elevation, there's quite a big difference in the shape of the roof, and you can see there's some differences to the fenestration, where the French doors were slightly different designed, and there was differences with the balcony areas. So this was what was approved. This was what we approved in the 2020, and now this is what they're proposing, which is the retention of the existing buildings. So we ended up approving quite a few of the changes because we were really trying to find a compromise with them between what they had constructed, and we were basically looking at the most harmful elements of it and trying to look at what we could do to reduce the impact of those, rather than basically refuse the whole thing for them to have to demolish quite a big chunk of the building. So the areas on this building, which is block 2, there wasn't actually a significant there weren't significant areas of concern really. The main things were the fact that it was fully rendered and didn't have the tile hanging. So this was what we approved as a compromise on the left hand here, which was to introduce the new tile hanging back into this element here at first floor level, and to introduce tile hanging into the gable within the roof level. So they were the main changes, and they haven't been carried out, and now the proposal is not to introduce the tile hanging in those 2 areas. And as you saw, the coloured render has been added into this area here, which again is considered to be slightly at odds with sort of the rest of the building. And then in terms of the rear elevation, this was the approved, the original approved rear elevation, and then this was the 2020. So again, this was the compromise scheme. So you can see there was quite a big difference between that original one and then the proposed one, in terms of the roof shape that we saw here. And then this is now from that 2020 scheme to the proposed. So again, there's not really that much difference now. We have basically approved the majority of those changes within that rear elevation, so there's not really much of a difference there. We've, in terms of the tile hanging, we've mainly looked at the front elevation, and part of the side elevation. The rear elevation isn't really that visible from anywhere, so there weren't really many concerns with that. So with the side elevations, again, the top one was the originally approved block 2, and then this one here was the 2020 change. So again, you can see at roof level, massive changes of what they had approval for and what they actually constructed. And then this is the difference between what we approved, which is the top right-hand one, and then what they're proposing now. So again, very slight differences. It's just the tile hanging again in this location here, which was previously approved, which we would have wanted to have seen, and again hasn't been incorporated now, and is just looking at the grey render. For the other side elevation, this was the originally approved elevation, then this one here was the 2020 change. So again, you can see that's not actually too different in terms of that elevation. And then now you can see from what we've already approved to now, that is basically the same. So there's no changes in that elevation from what we've already approved in 2020. So block 3 has the greater changes. So this was what was originally approved in the 2016 application. And you can see at roof level, it was 2 small dormers within the roof space, which sat comfortably within the roof. And then in 2020, when they came in, we raised significant concern with the fact that they had created a balcony in this area here and French doors. Whilst balconies are a feature within quite a few of the buildings in C Road, they aren't at roof level. They're all really mainly at first floor level. So it feels like this is quite a dominant addition that's been added at roof level, especially where this is quite a tall building as well. So whereas the others are mainly 3-storey, this is now 4-storey, and really sort of accentuates the fact it is a 4-storey building by having this balcony feature up there. So what we ended up doing through the 2020 application was they were asked to remove the balcony, turn the French doors back into windows, and then because of the fact that the French doors had, because we ended up with quite a high sort of eaves level here, this would have then been tile hung again to try and give the appearance of a lower eaves level, so that would have appeared like a lower eaves level from this point here, which would have reduced the perceived height of the building. And so this is then going from what we approved on the left-hand side and really wanted to see happen to now what they're showing on site, which is the French doors here in this balcony area here. So it doesn't feel like it was a huge change that we asked them to make, but it would have made a massive difference, we feel, to the appearance of this building and how it would have sat within the street scene, and would have removed this feature that we felt was quite dominant at roof level. So to us, that was an improvement that was quite essential. And then this is the originally approved rear elevation, and you can see that was quite different to what we approved in 2020, with again changes to the roofs. You can see there was originally quite a lot of hipped roofs, and then they gabled it quite a bit. So, but again, we compromised on this and ended up approving this after quite a lot of discussion with the conservation officer and site visits. It was agreed that this was acceptable again, because from the rear elevation there was limited views of the building. And so on the left-hand side, again, is what was approved in 2020, and then this is what's proposed now. So again, the rear isn't really any different. And then the originally approved side elevation of that building, and then again, the bottom is what we approved. Again, the tile hanging, so because it's gone from a hipped roof to a gable roof on the side, it was felt that tile hanging was quite essential again to try and reduce the perceived eave level of this building, because otherwise from the side view that appeared quite a tall side gable element, especially again where this was all fully grey rendered. So introducing the tile hanging at this point here was considered quite important again from that side view. And then this is again what was approved in the top hand, and then what they're proposing now, which again is to not introduce that tile hanging, which we felt was quite important. And then this was just the other side view. So again, originally approved at the top, proposed here. I don't think there's really any different again with this one of what's proposed. So again, although there was some tile hanging again proposed at this level here, because that again was gabled. So again, trying to give it the appearance of more of an actual roof rather than actual wall going up at this level. So again, tile hanging was just felt to be important. So this is how the buildings sit within the street elevation. So again, you can see that this one is a particularly tall building. So those side elevations that we're concerned with was that right-hand side here, and it also was that side part here that you would have seen across over the height of this building. And then you can see again the tile hanging, which we would have wanted to introduce this area here, so this being the balcony problem area. And then on this building, it was the tile hanging in this area here and here, just to try and create a bit of break in the materials in that front elevation. So then just looking at the parking, so again, the left-hand plan is what we previously approved in the 2020 application. So highways were concerned with that previous application that if they dropped below one space per unit, they've gone below the minimum parking standards, being a suburban sort of site. It's not close enough to a town centre to be classed as edge of town centre, so it is classed as suburban. So there is a minimum requirement of 1 parking space per unit. So that could be achieved with this layout plan. There was a condition requiring that they carried out these amendments to introduce the 30 parking spaces within 6 months of the decision being granted, and that hasn't happened. Within that plan, we also agreed 3 electric vehicle charging points. Again, they haven't been provided. And then this is the plan on the right-hand side that they're seeking approval for, which is basically just the plan they had originally. So our concern is that there is a way to achieve 1 space per unit. So whilst it's in an area where it's quite a wide road and there is potentially some on-street parking availability, it is also quite a busy area, especially during the summer. Lots of cars are parked up in this area, lots of pedestrians moving around in this area. And if there isn't 1 space per unit within this site, which could be made available if they actually provided what was approved, then there's potentially going to be more demand for on-street parking, which is likely to have amenity issues for the future occupiers of this unit, of these units, but also could result in some issues with pedestrian and highway safety. And obviously the need for electric vehicle charging, we're always keen to see that. And whilst it was mentioned about the fact that at the rear here there would be some electric vehicle charging points provided for the 4 houses, what was approved through the 2020 application was just for these 4 units, and there was a requirement for 3 electric vehicle charging points within this site of these 4 buildings. It didn't actually include the area to the rear. The area to the rear, where they've got 1 space per dwelling, is just going to be private electric vehicle charging spaces for those 4 dwellings. This site won't be able to use those. So again, it's just the fact that this has reduced the quality of the scheme. Obviously, the MPPF with paragraph 140 allows us to look at whether a scheme has reduced in quality from what was previously approved. And in both instances, with what we've approved, we're just trying to introduce the tile hanging and trying to remove that balcony and French doors at roof level, and trying to introduce a better layout, which will provide a better sort of amenity for the occupiers. That hasn't happened, and it could have done, and so it's felt that this is a poorer quality scheme. So it's recommended refusal on the basis that these changes haven't been provided, and we do consider that they are detrimental to the conservation area by not having been made. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers? Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Ooh, I mean, such a lot in... Do I want this one? Such a lot in what you've been saying. I don't particularly have views about the, sort of render or that, because knowing this road very well, there's such a wide variety of buildings. Some are very modern in design, so I don't think that looks out of place. I do think the eaves bit and the balcony is a problem, so I do have a difficulty with that. I've no idea what that shed structure was or is, but that looks quite incongruous as well. I think we should be very clear on the refuse storage, because that sort of can be a real eyesore otherwise and cause all sorts of problems. And I don't see why they've taken away the parking spaces and appear to have put in a little green bit. Although I would also like to ask what the landscaping is for this plan. Is there any landscaping there? So I have a lot of concerns about what has been done here. So I'd like to hear about the landscaping though. Thank you.
So, I mean, in terms of the landscaping, what they've done is this plan on the right-hand side here. So you can just see the areas of green, which you can see to the front of these parking spaces, and in this area here. And then if I try and quickly go back to the frontage photos. Oh, you probably can't actually really see it very well here. So there's a little bit of landscaping, like some hedge planting along the frontage here. Sorry, the area of open space you can't make, actually maybe from another photo it's better. there's an area here, I don't know if you can see that there, on the left-hand side, that is basically just grass. It's not really planted up. It's just a grassed area in this location. And then here you can see there is a little bit of planting along the frontage, but basically there's no substantial landscaping really within that space. Again, you can see here, there's a little bit of planting along here. I mean, you can see that the actual hard standing is actually quite raised from road level, so it's yeah, you can see that there's the hard surfing is basically most of it. But then the plan that we had approved in 2020 would actually really be worse than that, because we are looking to try and get the additional parking in, so it would actually probably get rid of some of that green space. Sorry, let me just go back again. So yeah, so on this plan here, which was the one that previously approved, I mean, it did actually show some trees. We've got some hornbeam trees in this corner here and in this corner here. But other than that, this would have been fully hard surfaced compared to this. So yeah, I mean, that is a consideration if members felt that it's actually more beneficial to have a small area of the soft landscaping to the front here in this area here, rather than the one space per unit. You know, that is a consideration.
Thank you. You want to come back?
Just to say, of course, it is right on the seafront and the grass just leading up to the sea, so perhaps it's not so important.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Keane, I don't particularly have a problem with the appearance. I'm a little bit confused about the parking. For the application that's before us now, what parking facilities are being provided?
So the right-hand side is what's there now, and that's what they're proposing. So they're proposing just to keep what's there on site, and what's there on site is 14 spaces.
Right.
So they're proposing to just keep that, and then the one on the left was what we'd. So they originally came in with this layout with the 2020 application, and Highways said no to this layout because they wanted to seek the one space per unit. So an amended plan came in with this layout showing that they could achieve the one space per unit, and that's what was then approved. And we'd then put this condition on saying within 6 months they needed to provide this layout, and then that hasn't happened. So they've just basically now come in with this application just to try and retain the parking as it is. So yeah, it's gone from 30 spaces down to 14 now.
Right. So how many flats are there?
32 in total. In total. This application is for 14, which is the 2 middle blocks, but obviously the parking serves all 4 blocks, which is 32.
Right, okay, so I'm sort of a little bit confused about the crossover. You know, we're looking now at an application for 14 flats, and there are 14 spaces, so I don't really understand how, what the overlap is.
The parking area to the front is to serve all 4 blocks.
Right.
So when that application came in for the 2 blocks, it would have incorporated that whole frontage area.
Right,
so,
okay.
So whilst the actual design of the 2 end buildings was considered okay, through the 2020 application, we've looked at the design changes to the middle 2 buildings, and the parking layout for the whole development was considered through that 2020 application. So that again is now what's being considered through this application, is the whole frontage parking for the 4 blocks, even though it's just the design of the 2 middle blocks we're considering as well. Okay.
Sorry, can I just go? So if it was agreed or you'd requested that there were 30 parking spaces, has there been some negotiation between then and now? Sort of, I don't really understand where we're at.
Well, we'd asked them to provide these 30 spaces within the 6 months, and they hadn't. We'd also asked, there was lots of conditions requiring them to carry out the changes to the building in terms of the tile hanging and to remove the balcony. And again, there was lots of conditions with lots of time restraints saying within this time period you need to have done this, and they haven't done any of that. So we had then served enforcement notice, but then in terms of the type of enforcement notice we served, that got withdrawn. And then we were looking at serving us a different enforcement notice because basically they haven't complied with any of those conditions, and they have 10 years. We can take enforcement action within 10 years if they haven't complied with the conditions. And there's a number of those conditions they haven't complied with because they haven't provided the spaces and they haven't done the work to the building. So we were then about to serve another enforcement notice on the fact they haven't complied with the conditions, and then this application was submitted.
So there are 14 parking spaces for 30 flats. Thank you. I actually have Councillor Alban next.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a tangled web, is it not? And I think most of the problems have arisen from this because of the amount of time it's taken them to actually try to complete the development. And I think over the course of a period of time, no eye's been kept on the building, so it's just developed and grown into what you've currently got. For me, I don't normally say this, but I'd like to look at it, a site visit. I'd like a site visit so I could actually go and look at this, and then to see for myself as to what the effects are, and whether what you're recommending would be the right course of action. But I am concerned about the rear, where those bins are. But then again, as you said, the development isn't actually finished. So I think that for that reason, that's the main reason I wanted to go and have a look at it, because it wasn't finished. Because there would still be, if we look at it and come back and then say, these are the issues we got, we can then say to the committee looks at it and the committee says, this is what we think that we may be able to give you consent for, but you've got to do it, you've got to comply with it, and you've because you've already serving notices on it, you have got your eye on it. So I think for me that's the thing. So I don't know if anybody else would agree with that, but I would propose a site visit, Chair.
Councillor Everett.
Well, as an occasional visitor, I don't particularly want to argue about site visits, but what I will say about this is I think that the sheer number of departures from the agreed plans would make it very difficult for this committee to agree the application that's in front of us, and I think there might be one or two of them that we'd have different opinions about, but the sheer number of them, and particularly the parking, I mean, people complain that highways don't give us the right advice on occasions on highway. They'd like highways to be more rigorous. Here we've got an abrupt departure really from what's been required, and that on its own would be enough for me to want to refuse this application, but I fully support the officer's recommendation. I think we should throw it out.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, Councillor Everett's stolen all my thunder. You know, we have a planning condition, we have conditions upon it, it's passed, and the individual blatantly disregards all of that and continues regardless. This is why we have planning law. The officers have done a fantastic job in trying to be supportive, going back time and time again, giving them time to do something, and they blatantly carry on thinking they're going to get it retrospective. And I agree with Councillor Everett, it should be refused.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
I think a lot's been said, but you know, we sit here and sometimes we don't get the enforcement we want from our planning officers. But I mean, they've tried and tried and tried. They've offered compromises, and it's all been ignored. I do have a bit of an issue with the pegs not being there because it just stands out. It doesn't mix in. I don't think a site visit would be useful because I believe that they applied for something, decided they were going to do something else. However long it took, it's irrelevant. They should have done what they applied for. Our planning officers have been more than compromising in trying to move this forward, but it's been ignored at every point. So I don't see how we can not support the planner's judgment.
Thank you. Councillor Makinson.
Are the flats occupied in those two middle blocks at all?
Yes, most of them are. I think it was clear from the photo from the rear that there's definitely one that's vacant at the moment.
Right.
We're not sure exactly on the numbers, but yeah, the majority of those, all the ones you can see from the front, they are all occupied.
Are they? Do you know if they're rented or sold? No, you don't.
I don't know.
I mean, it'd be strange if somebody had bought a flat
Yeah, I
that
think
didn't have planning
possibly-
permission.
I think it's probably more likely to be rented. But
Yeah,
I
probably.
won't say for
Okay,
definite.
thank you.
And I just wanted to double check on one of the things I think I remember reading in the original report, and that was about the quality of the materials used. Is there anything that you can add to that?
Well, I think it was more just in terms of quality, the fact that it was the grey render and the two multicoloured render at the top floor. Because I think one of them actually, I think the green might be green cladding, and then the blue is render. So it's more about the fact that we're keen to introduce the tile hanging back in, which is more of a traditional feature in a conservation area and is present on quite a few of the surrounding buildings. And trying to remove the multicoloured render, so it's something that, again, is more sympathetic to the conservation area.
Thank you. I don't have any other requests to speak, so we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for a refusal to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Were there any against? And any abstentions? No, thank you very much. That's therefore carried. The application is refused. Moving on to agenda item 5A, application for approval. This is A01 Upton County Primary School, Edge End Road, Broadstairs. Public speaking. Speaking against the application is Mr. Andrew McCulloch. You have 3 minutes.
G'day, thank you. I have to say I'm a bit surprised that it's managed to get this far. The original application included condition 10, which imposed requirements regarding external lighting based on recommendations from KCC Ecological Services, which in turn implemented advice from the Bats and Artificial Lighting in the UK document produced by the Bats Conservation Trust and Institute of Lighting Professionals. In the present application, we're led to believe that Ecological Services have changed their mind about the ambient light levels, although the only changes since the original application are the lights on the external side of the sports hall itself. I say led to believe because no Ecological Services document has been lodged on the planning portal, and one could be forgiven for thinking that facts have been made to fit the desired story. Ecological Services rightly state that pipistrelle bats are light tolerant. My recordings, which you should have a copy of at the planning portal, confirm this. However, slower moving species, the fact that slower moving species are present seems to have been discounted without evidence. I'm afraid the school has a track record of ignoring their neighbours in the road. They've made no effort whatsoever to comply with condition 10. They've never fitted motion sensors, relying on a complicated control system based on a light-sensitive PIR switch at a timer instead. Very briefly, application 111060 was retrospective for advertising signs, which was refused. The school appealed, but the Secretary of State rejected the appeal. At the end of 2023, 2 large advertising hoardings appeared on the school fencing. These were neither exempt nor deemed consent status, and after complaints of enforcement were rejected. The head teacher in the first case was Michaela Lewis, and the executive head of Viking Academy Trust in 2023 for the advertising hoardings on the fencing was Michaela Lewis.
Sorry, can you keep to the point?
I am keeping to the point. Let me finish and I'll point out why that is important. At the planning committee meetings regarding the sports hall itself, councillors spoke at both meetings critical of the poor communications between the school and the residents. And finally, during the school holidays, there's been work going on overnight, which nobody has been told anything about. Anyway, my point is largely that as was pointed out in the previous planning application, the council made a decision, or the planning committee made a decision about the lighting arrangements based on expert advice. So why now do we have to have a retrospective when nothing has changed?
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report. Can you turn your microphone on?
Oh, sorry,
please?
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the site, so it's Upton School. The building that this refers to is the sports hall, which is the building outlined in purple in this location here. So you can see the proximity to neighbouring properties on the eastern side of Edge End Road here. So again, this is just an aerial view of the site, and then this white building here is the sports hall. And then just showing a few photos of the area. So this is Edge End Road with the access into the school on the right-hand side here. And then you can see the sports hall in the distance here. And then this is the parking area that serves the school. So the sports hall had a condition 11, that allows it to be used for community groups outside of the school hours. And there's a number of restrictions on the hours of use in terms of the operation of the community hall, but it is up to 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturday, and up to 8 o'clock at night on Sundays. It's allowed to be used by the community. So the car park is used to park and then access the sports hall. And this application is regarding the lighting, which consists of both bollard lighting next to the footpath and lighting that's been installed on the actual sports hall itself, which provides sort of ease of access from the parking area to the building. So this again shows the vehicular access, and then you've got the pedestrian access gate here, so the sports hall's just off to the right hand side here. And then again, you've got the parking area, and then a few that are slightly later at night. So just showing some the existing lighting, obviously the street lights that exist along the pavement here. And you can see again the sports hall in the distance here. And then you can see again the sports hall is off to the right hand side here. So the sports hall is set back from the road. There's you can see there's some landscaping that does provide some screening of the sports hall as you approach it. And then again the sports hall is in this location here, and again here you can see some lights on the side here, and then again the car park with the lighting in the car parking area. And then again, just from the road, again looking with the site on the right hand side. So this is the sports hall here. The orange line is basically the pedestrian path that you would go from the sports hall to the car park. So this was the pedestrian gate that goes onto Edge End Road, and then this is the parking area in this location here. So there's a small distance that you'd need to walk to get to the sports hall, and lighting is needed for safety. So the condition that's currently on the lighting is that it has to be turned off between users. But, so that means that if you leave the sports hall, in theory, then the lighting would should be turned off, and as walking back to the car park or walking out to the road, there could be areas of darkness for people using it. So what's being proposed is that there's actually an extension of time to the time period that the lighting would be allowed on, to tie up with the operation period of the sports hall. So the request is that the lighting is allowed on until 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturday, and up to 8 o'clock at night on the Sunday. So there was consideration of motion sensors for the lighting, but environmental health said that actually could be classed as more of a problem, because if you've got lights going on, off, that's more sort of an issue potentially for residents, because it can be classed as more intrusive and can attract more attention than just a static light that's just been left on up until a certain period and then turned off overnight. So this is just showing the elevations of the sports hall, and this is a submission that the applicant has put in with the application. So you can see the areas circled are the lights on the building. So you can see there's quite a few, 2 on the side elevation here, and then a few running along this single story element, and then it wraps around the building. So these are part of the consideration. So they're circular buildings. You can see in this at the top of the photo here, they are circular ones that have just been attached to the building. And then the other lights that are being considered are these bollard lights, which run along next to the side of the footpath. So as you can see there, next to the footpath runs along here, and then again, this is the building in this location here. So it's providing a safe route of access to the sports hall. So obviously during the application, we've consulted residents. Obviously you can hear that there are a number of concerns with the lights. Residents are concerned that the lights have caused sort of light disturbance to them from on the other side of the road from the fact that they're on a long periods of time. During the application, there was negotiation with environmental health, and environmental health said that there could be some concerns from this bollard lighting because it's not actually shining down, it's like all the way around it, and that a way of trying to reduce the impact would be to fit shields onto the side of the lights in order to direct lighting away from the direction of the neighbours. So these were what was installed, which as you can see is lit all the way round, and then these are the shields that have now been added to these bollard lights. So you can see from the side of the neighbour, so the neighbour off to the right hand side, these have now been fitted onto the rear of those bollards in order to reduce sort of the light pollution heading towards the neighbour. So they're really just facing now towards the footpath, which is considered to reduce that impact. So environmental health has said subject to these being fitted, which as you can see has already happened, they now have no concerns with the bollard lighting and feel that given the distance and the low level of the lights and the fact there is some element of screening by the boundary, that as long as there's a condition retaining seeking retention of these shields, which has been proposed, that they have limited concerns with this application. In terms of the actual lighting on the building itself, you can see that there's again a similar design, that there's a shield that's added to the top of it, which directs the light down and stops again that from having a full sort of direction of light out from the building. It should be down to the ground. So again, this is another design that environmental health has said that's fine. In terms of the impact, the issue to do with the bats, we did consult with KCC Biodiversity, and they'd said that the lights chosen are considered to minimise spill because of the fact these shields have now been added as well. And whilst there's quite a few lights that are on the building, they consider that the impact overall from these would not be huge, and therefore it would not have a significant impact on bats, especially as they're going to be turned off at 10 o'clock each night anyway, so throughout the majority of the night they won't be on at all. So it's therefore considered that subject to these changes that have occurred and the safeguarding of conditions that seek the retention of these shields in order to restrict the lighting away from neighbours and away from the sky for bats, that this actually is an acceptable proposal and will enable the community use of the building to continue safely. So it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers? Councillor Garner.
Thank you. I understood that I could see those lights there. I can see that effort has been made to point them in the right direction, and obviously if people are going in the majority of the year, or well, good portion of the year, there won't be a need for lights because it won't be the winter, so it won't be dark. So I can see that. What I haven't understood is the need for the lights all round the outside of the building to be on until 10 o'clock in the dark. What are they there for? I mean, I can't see why they're there for safety or anything like that.
On the actual building. So here's the view here. So I'm not sure I know the answers to that as to why the lights are necessarily around the whole building. I would have assumed it's so that there could be potentially use or maybe of this outside area maybe as well. I'm not quite sure why the number are there. It may well be there's some doors that also go into other parts of the building, and again it's for safety. I don't know whether, I've not been inside the building myself, so I'm not sure whether you can go in and then come out these different exits at all. I'm not sure exactly why. Obviously all we're looking at is the fact that they are there, and is it harmful, and is there a concern for residents because of it, or ecology because of it. And the consultative advice we've had is that there is not a harm, so it's
Yeah, so there obviously is a need for lighting, for safety, for users to go up and down the path to the sports hall. I live very close to there, so I do walk up that road occasionally. I'm not sure that the fields are used at night, and then there is a need for those lights. So I agree that it needs to be lit so as people to get in, but I'm not minded to vote to approve this. While those lights, unnecessary lights, they might be acceptable as lights, but if there's no need for the lights, then they're surplus lights. There's no need for them, and they should be removed. Thank you.
Just bear with us, we're checking some of the information. Okay, we will come back to you, Councillor Garner. Councillor K-Bright.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to firstly sort of give you my reasons for bringing this to committee. Since I was elected last year, I've actually had quite a few of the school's neighbours contact me with concerns, and various concerns about various ways in which the school operates, but that's not relevant necessarily. But they do have concerns around this sports hall, around similar reasons, the ecology and also the light pollution. I think we need to remember the houses. There's a single house on Broadstairs Road which would be looking onto the rear of which is kind of looking onto the side of the sports hall, and there's one or two houses on the same side of the street on Edge End Road as well, I believe. And I think they're negatively impacted by the lights that Councillor Garner's mentioned in terms of light pollution. I think it's important where the kind of weight of concern I've had, that I did give residents the opportunity to observe how the decisions have been reached. So that's kind of my reason to call it in. But I would say that those side lights do have an impact on the house on Broadstairs Road and on the early house on Edge End Road.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I believe it's all about balance. So many applications, and I think lights are there for safety for the people using the facility. And I think with the shielding that's been provided, I think every effort has been made to reduce the effects on neighbours. I think that the benefits far outweigh the harm done by this extra lighting, and I do feel that a lot has been done to try and mitigate the effects. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Garner has hit the nail on the head, I think. When you look at the building in that picture there, the side of that building with the lights on, it just seems to be a greenswood area. And I'd like to know how often that area is illuminated for use to use that. And if it's not being used, then why do you need them on? And there's no reason. I appreciate you need lighting for safety, and all the access lights leading up to the building have had shades put on them pointing down, and really you only need the lights on where you're gaining entry to the building, and those side ones could effectively be switched off. But not knowing the numeracy of how often it's being used outside, because I don't know and I don't think we know, that would be a condition we'd need to look at and find out why. Again, I think I was one of the councillors that originally said, you know, can we not get the residents and the school together and bang their heads together and communicate in a positive way, which we wanted. And I think this is the same thing again, but I think it just needs a gentle hand on the tiller, maybe an officer to oversee that and see what we can compromise. Thank you.
The officers will come back. Unfortunately, we can't do that, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. And I do recall, Councillor Moore, you did indeed say that when we had this application before. So the original application for the sports hall, the condition 10 was about making sure that any external lighting, you know, was turned off when the building wasn't in use. It didn't define what the type of lighting was or where it was. And so I think in terms of the sort of query about the necessity of the lights, that's not actually been a matter that has been considered. The question would be, okay, if the lights aren't necessary, are they resulting in a harm? Because I think for all intents and purposes that area is not being used and it doesn't need to be lit, so they've put them along there, I would imagine, for security reasons, but that is obviously the motivations of any applicant is not something that we need to consider. In this instance, though, we need to consider whether or not there is actually harm caused to either the neighbouring properties or to the ecological aspects of where this site is. And obviously, you know, the view has been taken by both KCC Biodiversity and Environmental Health that there is no concerns as long as these lights go off at 10 o'clock at night. And therefore, you know, whilst I appreciate it feels unnecessary when looking at that elevation, there's not necessarily anything that would warrant a refusal or indeed us having any sort of real weight behind going back and asking for amendments to remove those lights, because there's not a harm created by them, in our view.
Councillor J. Bright.
Yeah, I think I'm loath to say that there isn't a harm created by them if the neighbours are saying that there is. I think it's all very well for... I understand that Environmental Health have said, no, there isn't, but the neighbours are saying that there is. So we can't disregard that. I totally appreciate Councillor Garner's point, because I agree that does look a little bit excessive, but I've got no way of knowing how that relates to what the neighbours see. Are they the lights that are causing the problems? I don't know, but those four along the main building do seem surplus to requirement if that's just on looking onto the field. I completely understand why there would be lights by the changing rooms on the left, but then round the outside there, I just think I think that just seems a little excessive to me. But on the other hand, it's a community, but I'm really pleased that the school is using this as a community facility. We need to be encouraging that, so I totally understand why we need the safety lights, the bollards, and I welcome the fact that they've put shields on them, because that does seem to have made a difference. But if there's any way we can go back and work out whether these are actually necessary, because I feel like the neighbours aren't really being listened to here. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I realise that we have a member of the public who wants to come back in, but I cannot allow you to do that. The rules of the committee are that once the public speaking is over, we go into the presentation from the officer and then the debate, and there is no other opportunity to speak, so I'm sorry, I can't allow it.
I've got pictures.
No, I'm sorry, I can't allow it. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, can't you have lights if you want lights? It's not whether you have the lights or what they're for, it's whatever issues that they cause. So there could be 20 lights on there, that's not the problem. The problem is what the issue is what the luminance is. And I think the questions for me are, what's the distance between the lights on the side of that building and the fronts of the properties? Anybody listening?
Yeah, sorry, just...
Sorry, have you finished? Have you finished, Councillor Alban?
No, I'll ask the question.
Sorry. Yeah, the officer is coming back.
The distance, we'll measure the distance, but I think for clarity, because of what's been mentioned, is the north elevation. Okay, so that elevation that we're looking at with all those lights is facing to the north, so it's not opposite, not facing directly the neighbours on Edge End Road, but it's the neighbour to the north. And because it's their ground floor lights, if we go back to there, their ground floor, the neighbour to the north, which I'll go to, that's the satellite image, so you can see. There we go. I'll get the measurement, so where it's facing. It looks like it's 43 metres away from the side elevation beginning along number 2, Edge End Road to the north, so it's 43 metres away.
Okay, so effectively those lights on the side of that building, what we're talking about here, don't face Edge End Road?
No, the side elevation.
Yeah, okay. So do you know the luminance of those lights, if that's the right word?
We can. It's not detailed in the report. We can have a little look because it's about could be about intensity or about how the light travels. So yeah. We can have a quick look and see if we can find out. Fundamentally, we would defer to environmental health on that point.
Yeah. Okay. Can I come back, Chair? I mean, for all of the discussion that's taken place, sitting here listening to my colleagues was those lights were facing the residents. And so therefore they were the ones affected. But you're telling me that they don't face Edge End Road. I can't know where they were, particularly these residents live. But personally, you know, I can't see a problem with it. I'm not living opposite, but I can't, in planning terms, seeing issues with those lights. Thank you.
Can I just clarify on that point? So Edge End Road is off to the left here. So this elevation here faces Edge End Road. So there are 2 lights on that elevation facing Edge End Road. And then this is the side elevation facing into the school site. Although, as you saw from that, going back to this plan. Well, that's probably the easiest plan really, because that's the sports hall. That's the elevation there that's got the majority of the lights on. There's 2 on that end one, and then you can see like that's the closest neighbouring property. So it's 43 metres from the corner of their property to the nearest light on this building. And so obviously those 2 neighbours would see that side elevation view of those lights, but the majority of neighbours here would just be seeing the 2 end lights here.
So there's street lights in Edge End Road? So they're on winter time, so they'll be on early evening, whatever. So are any residents affected by the street lights? I don't know. Those street lights will be brighter than what's on the side of that building. So personally, I can't see a problem. Thank you. In planning terms, that is. Thank you.
Councillor Wing next, please.
I think we've forgotten that also there's concerns around wildlife, so that doesn't seem to be touched on at all. So I welcome the fact that they've not used sensors because they could be going on and off all night. I come from a background of a senior teacher in a school, so I was in that meeting as well, and I cannot understand why the school hasn't reached out to its community and tried to solve this problem without bringing it back here. I think I also said that at that time. It just seems folly that they haven't tried to address the issues of their neighbours. They don't appear to be a good neighbour. But I also would like to go back to those lights on the side of that, on the sports hall. So those lights are clearly not for any use of that field because they wouldn't be good enough. It wouldn't be safe to be playing under those lights. You would have to have floodlights that are flooding down. So that if the school are using that as a play area, using those lights, then I would be concerned over health and safety in school, but that's their issue. I cannot see why these lights are here. And what I can't see is they're higher up on the building, so they are going to impact local people and wildlife. Why didn't, if this is a pathway, then why haven't they dropped these lights down so that they're at the bottom of the building, actually lighting any footpath up, which would then drastically minimise the impact on wildlife and drastically reduce the impact on glare going out to neighbours. Also, is the building always used until 10 p.m. and 8 p.m. on a Sunday? And if it's only used until 9 p.m, do these lights automatically switch off? or are they on a timer so that regardless of whether anybody's in there until 6 or 10 or whenever, those lights will stay on? Because again, I find it quite a surprise that a school can afford to have lights on when they don't need to have lights on. So that's my concern. I can't support the motion to approve this, because I think the school should have done more to reach out to the neighbours' concerns, and I definitely have a problem with all these here because I can't see why they're there. It could be fire access, fire safety, but then they could be lower down, and that would also be a safe means of people exiting a building if there was a fire, because I'm assuming those 2 blue doors would be fire doors, but that's really, I can't see the point of those lights.
Councillor K-Bright.
Just a point of clarification, I have been visited my surgery by the resident of Broadstairs Road, which is one of those 2 properties. There didn't used to be a sports hall there, they had no light out the back, and now they've got light pollution in their back. So just being really clear on that, there are 2 properties that are affected by those lights on the side.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I find it quite difficult to understand what's going on here, to be honest with you. I think those lights can only be there for security purposes, because I can't see why else you put them there. I am conscious of the impact of light pollution. I happen to live in a particularly dark place, and my neighbours tend to like to put up security lights which are very bright and which illuminate the area, and I don't welcome it. So I do have some sympathy with the neighbours who are affected by the increase in lighting, and I think that we should listen to them, and we should understand that if they're coming to meetings and they're registering objections to this, then it clearly is affecting them. I'm willing to take the professional advice in terms of the wildlife, but I have concerns about those lights being on and as suggested in the application, and I don't think I'm prepared to vote for the application as it stands.
I'm just going to make one comment that I want to make regarding whether or not lights should be the sensitive ones coming on and off and not. And really it's picking up on what Councillor Wing was saying. Wildlife will set these lights on and off, and they could be a huge nuisance coming on and off all the time as opposed to the static ones. So I prefer the static ones to the ones coming on and off, but that's the reason why, having lived where wildlife has been turning someone else's security lights on, I know that that is a nuisance. But just bear with us a minute. All right. We will now put, so there are no one else wants to speak. I've got no other hands indicated. Thank you. We will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Would those in favour please indicate? And those against? Thank you. So the motion is lost. What we have to do next, as regular members will know, is we need to write another motion. So I'm going to hand straight over to Mr. Livingstone, who is going to make a suggestion.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. From the discussion, I think it's pretty clear that the focus is on the number of lights linked to, I suppose, concerns about the real necessity for them. And therefore, I think it's probably best in this circumstance to try and find some sort of more amicable solution, to defer to officers to seek further information, a potential reduction in the number and location of lights on the northern elevation, and specifically I'm talking about that elevation that we can see there because that has been subject to most of the discussions, and to return to Planning Committee for decision. That would be a potential motion that can be moved. Obviously, if a member does want to move a different motion that's maybe a bit more specific about the overall number of lights, that would be suggested. But given the discussion has focused solely really on this, specifically facing those neighbours that Councillor Bright has mentioned.
Reviewing the impact of light pollution on the neighbours.
Yeah, I can. Do you want me to read something? Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to just slightly make an amendment to the motion. Hopefully no one's going to say that it's a bad motion on the table, but we'll go with it. So defer to officers to seek further information and potential reduction in the number and location of lights on the northern elevation to consider the impact of light pollution on neighbouring properties and to return to members for decision.
Thank you. Would anyone like to move and second?
Councillor Garner wants to. Yeah.
We'd like to comment. Councillor Garner.
I just want to clarify that if what you're talking about, because I just counted, so there's 10 lights on there, we're talking about all those 10 lights. Because you mentioned northern and...
Yeah, can I come back on that? Sorry. So technically it's 8 lights on the northern elevation. So we're obviously the 2 that are on here, just counting there, yeah, there's 10 on that image. Emma mentioned that the elevation on the left-hand side is actually facing Edge End Road directly. But obviously, you know, whether or not, I mean, I'm happy to amend the motion to include eastern elevation as well.
So we're not just talking about impact on neighbours, we're talking about impact on wildlife. So whether they're facing north, south, east or west, if they're unnecessary, they're impacting wildlife.
Could you also...
I'm going to say impact. I'm just going to say consider light pollution then, to keep it very generic, so that we can come back with environmental health and also with KCC again. We can get further comments from both of them.
Ian, could we also mention the type of light? Because if there is an element of access, because it's fire safety on that side, then if the lights were pole lights and further down, then I think that would be a compromise.
So to the point that the suggestion is that it includes location of lights potentially to look at, but also it's a bit about further information, because I think that the point that's been raised is clearly, well, why are they there? And I think that is something that I think it's worth seeking, so the members can be informed of that point. Shall I read it out again?
Yeah, I think, Councillor Wing, if we leave the wording as generic as it is, then it allows the officers to check all of those aspects.
Do we need a proposer and a seconder, and then I'll read it out?
So can I have a proposer, Councillor Moore, and seconded Councillor Everett?
Read out.
Just going to read it out again.
Defer to officers to seek further information and potential reduction in the number and location of lights on the northern and eastern elevations to consider the impact of light pollution and return to members for determination.
And those in favour? And against? And abstain? Thank you. Right, moving on. Agenda item 5I.
Yeah, if you didn't have the microphone on, it might be advisable just to repeat the outcome of the vote for the benefit of people on the stream, because watching meetings on the stream, it's extremely frustrating when people don't have the microphones on.
You're absolutely right. I pressed the button and the microphone didn't come on. So the result of that is that it's being deferred to officers for return for further information as soon as possible. Thank you. And now, agenda item 5I, application for deferral, Kent House Nursing Home, Fairfield Road, Broadstairs. Public speaking against the application, Mr. Lawrence Coley, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. The location of this proposed application is within an area that contains an elderly population in both the mansions and the sheltered accommodation at Pearson House. In addition, there are 2 secondary schools, one of which is adjacent to Kent House. There's also a junior school at the other end of Fairfield Road. The outside space policy, QD03, there doesn't appear to be, there's no provision for private or shared external outside space in the application. And surely if we learned anything from the COVID pandemic, that surely highlighted the need for this. We have concerns over the privacy. The windows overlooking residents in Fairfield Park will be from permanently used rooms rather than currently where the rooms are less used and tend to be either bathrooms or kitchens. Parking, this is a big one. Regarding the parking survey undertaken, it highlighted significantly less unrestricted spaces than outlined by the applicant. When was the survey conducted? During the school holidays? Because I'm really surprised. I suggest maybe you could do, well, we have existing problems with illegal parking during school pickup times. This has been ongoing for a long time. The double yellow lines are just ignored. I suggest maybe a survey between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 2:30 and 3:45, and then you might get a lot clearer picture of the dangers involved to the school children and others within this area at that time. The parking spaces in the plan are a lot smaller than the recommended 6 metres in length, and they're only 8. This application is for 22 people. Realistically, 8 spaces. Of these, at least one will have to reverse into a busy road to exit, which hasn't been considered. If you look at the plan, the only way out of that will be moving out into a busy road. This all in all will result in more parking issues within Fairfield Road, which will cause longer backups of traffic, churning out fumes by our schools. Emergency vehicles already experience difficulty accessing Fairfield Park, as do refuse vehicles. This will add to the increasing risk of accidents. In the past 12 months, there have been a minimum of 5 cycles colliding with cars of 2 residents in Fairfield Park alone. In addition, there was a sad fatality of a young man in Fairfield Road and a girl airlifted to King's College Hospital. There will be an increase of vehicles coming and going throughout the day with home food deliveries as well. We're not against change. That is proved by not opposing the previous application to change Kent House into 8 2-bedroom flats. But the HMO is not in keeping with the current area and significantly impact the community that lives there.
Thank you. The Planning Applications Manager will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for the change of use from a care home to a 21-bed HMO with the erection of bin storage and parking. So, as just mentioned, there is previous history on this building with an application last year being granted for 8 flats, converting the existing building. So the main consideration for members is the principle of development and really in particularly its policy HO 19, which specifically looks at HMOs, as well as obviously within that policy and within separate policies, looking at the impact on living conditions of neighbours and also highways safety. So the red point is Kent House. So I've had mention already of Fairfield Road with Dane Court sort of opposite and on the corner. Then you've got Fairfield Park, which accesses the dwellings in this development here in this area, but you've also got an access which runs off Fairfield Park, which accesses Kent House, and also the mansions, which is already mentioned, which is 30 units. So this is just identifying where Kent House is. So it is off Fairfield Road, and it's obviously but it's accessed from the same access that accesses the residential properties, the 15 dwellings. And this is Fairfield Park, so Fairfield Road is behind us, and you can see, excuse me, you can see Kent House at the back there. So it is sort of off the main road and tucked around the back. However, it is obviously it's quite a large property at the moment. It's in quite close proximity at the moment to the mansions, which you can see just off to the left here, this yellow stock bricked building here. So this is the front, excuse me, the front of Kent House. You've got some parking at the moment at the front, which serves the care home use. And looking to the right-hand side, you can see where there's obviously some bin storage there, and the rest of that parking area You can see one of the neighbours on Fairfield Park that has a rear elevation which fronts onto effectively the parking area, and then the side elevation of the building, which we'll look at in a second. This is from within that sort of entrance to Kent House. So again, the rear elevation that we were looking at is in this area to the right of the photograph. You can see the next dwelling behind the sort of front conservatory. So this is an isometric view from Google, so I appreciate it's a bit blurry, but it's quite difficult to really gauge the sort of mass of the building from just looking at front elevations and side elevations. So what you have is the mansions, the building mentioned with the 30 flats is to the left-hand side. Those dwellings on Fairfield Park are on the right-hand side of the image. Kent House in the middle. You can see that you've got a two-storey development at the front, then you've got a two-storey link to a two-storey bit at the back of the building. That should be a bit more apparent from here, where you've got various side staircases, which are fire escapes for the building, and then, excuse me, the sort of cut-out area in the middle. So, in terms of the existing unit, the existing use. So it's a 22-bed care home at the moment. So information that's been submitted states there are 16 full-time employees. Obviously, we've seen the front of the site where the applicant stated there are 8 spaces, but obviously you could see it was pretty much as parked as you're going to get, and there weren't 8 cars in there. So there is parking at the front, but it's not formalised at this point in time. In terms of looking at the layout, so we have the entrance, and you have a series of bedrooms. You have a dining room at the front in that conservatory, and then throughout the building you have various communal lounges and a significant number of bedrooms, all of which have ensuite facilities. Looking at the left-hand side of the building, so next to where the mansions is, this is sort of just looking down that access, so just to your left you've got the mansion sort of directly there. So this is one access that's down the side of the building at the moment, which goes to a ramp at the back. So just showing you a bit more detail of the existing ground floor plan. So again, the main entrance in the middle, a number of bedrooms dotted around, communal area in the centre, and then that link where it was two-storey at first floor, two-storey, but then wasn't actually connected to the building at the back, is the communal lounge. You've got a ramp access that goes up to that communal lounge as well, and a maintenance room, and you can see on this floor plan where those fire escape staircases are on the right hand side of the building. And then at the back of the building at ground floor, you've predominantly got bedrooms all the way around the outside, and then you've got a laundry room, a hairdressing facility, and a wet room as well. So then this is, if we look at the top of the slide here, we've got the rear elevation of the building. So this is the rear elevation of the building at the moment. So you can see, as it is now, there isn't a lot of space on the site. The site has been pretty much fully developed to its maximum. And it was the same case with the 2-bedroom flats, that the amount of communal space was limited by virtue of the actual footprint of the building and trying to seek a conversion to the building as it is. So you can actually see the mansions at the rear there as well. So in terms of the first floor plan, so you can see the roof of the conservatory at the front there, you can see those 2 fire escapes, and then that sort of cut out section where you've got the link between the 2 sections. So you can see in terms of the fire escape, so this is a view down that side elevation facing towards the rear of those properties on Fairfield Park. And then you've got a view from the second staircase, so you can see the first staircase there, but the second staircase there, which goes up to that flat roof section. So you can see it's it's obviously where the fire escape is at the moment. And then looking at the first floor plan in a bit more detail, so at the moment you've got bedrooms pretty much solely around the outside, but you have got some of the interstitial windows are ensuite windows. But you've got the bedroom windows on the side here, and then at the rear here you've got 2 bedroom windows facing the rear of the neighbours on Fairfield Park, as well as windows facing onto those windows that directly look back onto the windows from the mansion. So there is a lot of sort of overlooking that it does pre-exist within the built form. So in terms of the proposal itself, it's 21 rooms but 22 occupants because there's one room that has a potential for a double. So this is been dictated by the HMO licensing procedure. So the private sector housing team have looked at this site and worked out how many occupants you can get with the provision of services and sort of facilities that they've provided, which would automatically limit in an HMO licence how many people could occupy the facilities. So in terms of what you're looking at there for the ground floor plan, all of the green areas are the communal areas. So specifically, you have a communal lounge at the front, communal kitchen behind. You've then got in the centre, the communal lounge is as it is now, which is a communal lounge. You've then got a lawn where that hairdresser facility is. Then you've now got a laundry area, and then another communal kitchen and a communal shower. So within the ground floor plan, if I click on to go into more detail at the front, so the vast majority of the bedrooms that are being put forward would have ensuite facilities and also showers. So there are 2 units on the ground floor that would have toilets but wouldn't have a shower, which is why there are 2 communal showers on the ground floor. There is also this unit here in the middle, which is would just still be a bedroom for HMO, but it's the double room, which also, as well as including an ensuite, it also has a kitchenette within it as well. So blue is a maintenance room only to be accessed from the outside. Then this is the rear, so again you've got those communal areas, the laundry facilities, the kitchen, communal shower, and again all the way around the outside are the bedrooms. You can see one of the bedrooms, I think this is bedroom 9, doesn't actually have a shower facility, so then they would be using the communal shower facilities. And similarly with bedroom 6, they wouldn't have a shower, whereas all of the other rooms at ground floor actually have shower facilities within the room. Then in terms of the first floor, so same principles apply. The red are the bedrooms, the green are the communal areas. So then at the front you have the bedrooms, so similar sort of situation. You've got bedrooms 12 and 13 share a communal shower with the communal, but there are dotted communal toilets around, but every room actually has ensuite facilities. You've got 2 communal kitchens upstairs at the front. And then to the rear, you've got laundry, a communal shower, and then predominantly it is bedrooms, as it was with the care home use. So in terms of the considerations, so Policy HO19 basically permits HMOs where they wouldn't give any rise to unacceptable neighbourhood impact through noise and general disturbance, that it wouldn't result in the intensification or concentration of those uses in the area, that there is suitable car parking and there are suitable waste arrangements. So on the character of the area point, the private sector housing team have confirmed there are no licensable premises of HMOs within 100 metres, and there's no evidence to suggest that there are any other HMOs in the vicinity of this site, certainly within the guideline of the 100 metres radius, which we look at through the policy. So in terms of whether or not it changes the inherent character of the area, it's simply not considered by officers that there's any discernible impact on the character of the area and the types of uses by virtue of it being an HMO rather than a care home. Now, in terms of living conditions, that is where there are certainly considerations about whether or not the number of users for this type of facility would result in impacts on the neighbouring properties. Well, in terms of comparing the extant use of the site, in terms of it being obviously a care home, it's certainly stated that there are existing staff levels. I would say though that with the 16 members of staff, that's the total number of employees. Obviously they'll be on a shift rota. We don't have that detail, but obviously you've got the residents who are more likely to not be coming and going to the site, but obviously the staff and any visitors would be more likely to occur. There is also the point that the officer raised in the report is that there is a relatively decent amount of activity because this access road is serving the mansions as well. That's 30 residential units, so there are comings and goings in and around the area. So In terms of the officer view of the number of occupants within this building, it's not considered that the comings and goings would be tantamount to causing and resulting in a significant noise and disturbance to neighbouring properties by virtue of the distance from the properties on Fairfield Road, but also the amount of activity that already occurs with regards to the mansions and the number of units that are there, and also when you take into account the current use of this building. Now, we've previously discussed many times when talking about HMOs that it cannot be taken as read that it will automatically result in noise and disturbance issues by virtue of antisocial behaviour. I do understand the concerns of members and certainly of residents in terms of the potential for that to occur. That is something that we are mindful of, and we have certainly looked at with various cases in the past. Obviously, this is it's a licensable property. It is a management issue solely with regards to how the HMO is managed in terms of any antisocial behaviour, and obviously there are other council functions which do look at those sorts of issues when they do arise, including community safety. But on a planning merits case, we have to take it that we are judging it on its merits rather than actually taking a view that there's actual evidence that there's planning harm from it being an HMO inherently, which is simply not the case. So, in terms of the actual accommodation itself, looking at both the HMO licensing provisions but also the communal facilities that we've talked about, we consider that the actual HMO, in terms of the new residents, provides a suitable level of accommodation. The public speaker has mentioned, obviously, the fact that there aren't any actual areas for outside space. However, they are looking fundamentally to reuse the existing building. That does create an issue in terms of that there is no outdoor space at the moment for the care home, and there wouldn't be any outdoor space for the flats that have been approved. So we don't think that is a determining factor that would warrant refusal to suggest that this accommodation is substandard, especially given the number of communal communal areas that are provided within the buildings themselves. So in terms of, just to mention the elevation, so there are no external changes proposed to the property other than the bin store. So at the front, it is proposed to put a sort of timber fence up and have the bins in pretty much the location that you saw in the photo, but actually putting fencing around it to formalise that area. One of the main concerns, though, that's been mentioned and has been looked at by KCC repeatedly is the impact on the highway network. So, as mentioned, there is an existing use to the building which generates parking in terms of both from staff and from visitors, and that parking area at the moment, it's a similar level of parking that's being proposed within this, because obviously, as mentioned, the area is actually limited in terms of the amount of parking you can get, and therefore concerns were raised by KCC about what is the impact then on the surrounding network in terms of potential parking stress. It's important that in terms of what KCC have looked at, they haven't considered, because it's an HMO, it is not assumed that there would be expected to have one car per person who lives in an HMO. It does not track on any evidential basis that that's the case, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier with regards to flats. However, there does need to be parking provision and an expectation that some users will have cars, and therefore they will be parking in and around on the network. So you'll note from the officer's report that there was a parking survey that was submitted, which looked to provide further information. It's been mentioned by the speaker, and indeed it's cited by KCC in their comment, that there were concerns about the survey information that was provided in terms of whether or not they were overstating the ability of cars to park on certain areas of Fairfield Road by virtue of showing areas that were either less safe or not to the same depth of parking space that you'd need. However, that being said, KCC therefore looked at the relevant section of Fairfield Road directly near the site in terms of the car parking survey to see whether or not what parking stress was created. And so I'm just sort of going to read from the report of the KCC comment on this. It says, of the 38 spaces in Fairfield Road, the highest number of parked cars observed during the survey was 12. Now, the survey to mention in terms of the concerns of when it was carried out, the time periods that they were carried out was at, I think it's 3, let me just get the time exactly, 3 p.m. and 11 p.m, noting that it from the sounds of this wasn't at school, was in school holiday time, but it was at 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. The idea being the 11 p.m. is trying to take on board all residents. So all residents are there. What's the parking stress in the area? In terms of the idea of how many cars will be generated by this number of users of an HMO, the KCC view is that you would have an average of about 10 vehicles with 7 parking spaces on site. You'll note there are 8 there, but one of them is considered to be not specifically particularly usable. So KCC have said, well, if one of them can't be used, then we'll look at 7. On that basis, that would imply that 3 cars are displaced onto the highway in and around the area. And given the amount of parking that's still available in the area for 3 cars to park, given the parking survey information that's been provided, it was considered that as well, given the sustainable location of the site, it's on a bus route, it's within walking distance of, not well, it is within walking distance of the train station, but it's not within 800 metres of the train station, so I wouldn't necessarily cite that. But it's considered by KCC that on those terms alone, the development could proceed. However, there is concern about the safety of the access into Fairfield Road. We've had mention of it being a busy road, and I think that's more generated obviously by the fact that you've got 30 units at the mansions, and then you've got the sort of, I'm going to say 15 dwellings. I haven't counted them, but number 15 is there. There are a number of dwellings in Fairfield Park that obviously use that junction that you can see where the turning has been demonstrated for tracking for vehicles. KCC specifically have cited the fact that they wish that the yellow lines need to be extended. So you can see the yellow lines that have definitely faded here, which may speak to what the residents cited about the fact that they're not particularly adhered to. But the KCC are requesting that the areas of the turning area and extending into Fairfield Park further that are not covered by the yellow lines are covered by yellow lines. Now, the way that works is through a traffic regulation order under the Highway Act. Now, that is a separate process from planning. We can't necessarily obligate that to happen and to be successful because it has to go through a different part of legislation. What we can require, and this is something that's come up at the committee before, is we can obligate the applicant to go through that process with best endeavours and work with KCC, put in an application that KCC then process, and then they would have to consult with the local community about a traffic regulation order. So that is what we've proposed in this instance, to defer on the basis of the legal agreement, which I'll come on to what that covers, to actually require a TRO process to be started and to be followed through with, and the applicant has agreed that there'll be a legal obligation that would obligate them to do that. In terms of the other matters that are covered in the report, there are contributions that have been requested by Kent County Council separately, which are looking at community learning, libraries, social care and waste. Now, the reason I'm raising that in particular point is this is the first request that we've had from KCC for contributions on an HMO. That's never happened before. Now, this has come because of the scale of the HMO specifically. So they've considered that because there's more than 10 people, that there would be an impact by virtue of impact potentially on the services around there. Now, in this instance, the applicant has agreed to the request that's come in. That totals £700 odd for community learning, library services of £1,300, social care £3,800 pretty much, and waste for the KCC Recycling Centre of about £1,000. So that would also be within the legal agreement to be secured. There is also 4 trees to be planted. I'll go back to the block plan. 1 at the front and 3 at the rear. The species of which I've mentioned about the condition and the point of information. We need to make sure we're securing an appropriate species, because at the rear you could see it was very tight. So we are looking at more ornamental species, whereas at the front there is the potential to actually have something that is more to scale. There was a previous application to remove 2 trees due to their condition and their safety in the past. That was agreed on the basis that 4 trees would be planted. This effectively brings those 4 trees forward, and therefore that's why we've obviously requested the further details to ensure that they're the correct species when they are planted. So the application is recommended to defer and delegate for approval, subject to the legal agreement, including the provisions outlined and safeguarding conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Thanks for that detailed report. I called this in a while ago because I had a number of concerns, I think some of which have been outlined by one of the residents of the mansions. And I'm very familiar with this site and that Fairfield Park, because I have also been involved talking to planning officers about that other application that was mentioned to do with the TPO trees. But I'll come back to that in a minute. I feel that the potential impact this HMO would have over its neighbour, the mansions, which has been mentioned is within about 20 metres at one point of this, is actually quite significant. I think you've sort of indicated that that there's a lot of traffic movement in and out of this generated by the mansions, and I'm not really sure that's actually the case. The mansions.
No, sorry, I'm going to jump into there. If sorry,
right, yeah, no.
That's not something. Sorry, I appreciate that may have come across. So I'll take that back in terms of misspeaking. I think the point in terms of that's been raised is the concern about vehicular conflict. So in terms of generation of vehicle movements, obviously, actually you can see it on the aerial image. I think that's probably the easiest way to see what actually the road serves. If you bear with me. So you can see that there is a parking area that's here that sort of serves the mansion. So again, it's only the amount of movements created by, I suppose, that parking area and the residents of the mansions specifically. Okay. Thank you.
Right, no, you did. Okay, I think getting back to what I was really getting at was that this new HMO is going to have much more of a significant impact on those residents who live at the mansions than the previous care home had on the impact of their living conditions, because as it was a care home, the majority of the people living there were within the care home. They weren't coming and going as much as these people will be who are living in the HMO. So I think that needs to be a consideration I'll be interested in hearing from others. You talk quite a lot about the highways. I think it is worth emphasising. I'm sure those of us who live in Broadstairs will be more than aware that it's bookended by Charles Dickens School and Dane Court Grammar School. Fairfield Road, as has been mentioned, is extremely busy for an hour or so in the morning and for an hour or so in the afternoon. And as has been mentioned, there have been a number of accidents in that road for various reasons, many because there's so much parked cars along that road. And I find it very difficult to accept a traffic survey that was done when there were no schools, when nobody was at school. It was done during the holidays, as far as I think Mr. Livingstone said. So you don't get a true reflection of what those roads are like. To assume that this number of residents in a HMO are going to generate 10.2 cars doesn't make any sense to me. I can't, there are likely to be a good number of cars just with people coming to visit, let alone the people who live there. And as you've pointed out, that Fairfield Park is double yellow lined, it's going to be more double yellow lined. There aren't sufficient parking spaces, and a couple of, as has been indicated as well, the traffic survey, there were issues with it, and I know a couple of the roads that were used, because I've had a look, aren't suitable to parking that were assumed to be. Fair Street being one of them. You park a car in Fair Street and you block the road. Fairacre's the same. You park a car in Fairacre, you block the road. You're risking more accidents. I would just like to talk as well about the car parking spaces that that are outlined. I think it's 6 or 7. If you wouldn't mind showing that picture, because that links to the tree issue, the TPO trees. As you mentioned, there was an application to fell 2 trees there that were protected by TPOs that were at the front there, where those exactly. There were 2 trees there, and when permission was granted for those trees to be felled, there was a condition about planting 4 trees, and in fact it was stressed that those 4 trees should be planted in a similar position to those felled. Now, and that application was made and approved before this application was considered. So what should have happened, and what really should happen, is those 4 trees should be planted where those parking spaces are. And to put 3 of those trees at the back of the building in a space that doesn't, it's very difficult to see exactly how wide that really is, but I think when I saw one of the satellite views, that backs onto, there's a small gap between that and the fence to the school. And you mentioned there'd be ornamental trees in there. I mean, I don't see how anything can grow healthily in there apart from 3 shrubs, because as soon as they start growing, they're going to start causing a problem. They're not going to be any good there. There should be the 4 trees planted where they were originally told they should plant them. So I've got concerns about the trees. I've got serious concerns about the impact this HMO could have on the neighbours who live in the mansions and who've lived there happily for quite a long time. And as I say, the highway impact is, I know KCC I don't know if any of them actually came to visit, but I know KCC have come up with a report that says that this is acceptable. It's sort of in sharp contrast to one we heard at the beginning about the KCC Highways report on the application in Sea Road that actually said they didn't approve of that one, that had more parking spaces, and the road that they were allowing people to park in didn't have any schools either side of it. There wasn't going to cause any serious risk of accidents, so I find that a bit difficult to believe. So I know it's difficult to go against KCC Highways, but in this case they're wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to correct myself again. Apologies for misspeaking again. The parking survey results. So I've got the parking survey up, and I think I just want to clarify exactly what's been put in. So this parking survey was conducted on 3 dates: Tuesday the 11th of June, Wednesday the 12th of June, and Saturday the 15th of June. That's in term time. Now, it's worth noting as well that within the actual parking survey, you've got parking surveys that were done on an hourly basis from 3 to 11. So looking at it each hour in terms of the parking spaces available. Now, as mentioned by Councillor Garner, I think it is really important to note the fact that the information that's provided in terms of the streets that have been shown as having spaces, a lot of them have just been disregarded by KCC because they're not suitable. Fair Street, Fairacre, indeed Fairfield Park, and they've only looked at Fairfield Road in terms of the parking stress specifically that's occurred at that point. So I will double check. What I want to do is I want to double check those dates because I want to just check when half term was. But I will. But that's when they occurred, so I can come back on that point. Yeah, of course, half terms, mate. Sorry.
I just want to say I would advise anybody who has any doubts about this to go up there, stand on the corner of Broadstairs Road and Fairfield Road at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then go back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. It is bedlam up there. It's chock-a-block. Whatever any report says on here, and this application is likely to make it significantly worse.
Thank you. Councillor Kay-Bright.
I completely agree with Councillor Garner. I'd also add that Charles Dickens kicks out at 2:30, so, or 2:15. So sending anyone at 3 o'clock is going to literally knock off half of the school run. There's also Bromstone Primary at the other end. So from a parking perspective, I just don't agree with that. We had residents come to Broadstairs Town Council when we held a road safety day, and we had a couple of people from Fair Street come along and say just how dangerous it is. So I'm against it from that point of view. I'm also concerned with the scale of it and the number of properties within the HMO. I think if you can't provide a residence with a shower for 2 of your residents, you're not providing enough single units, frankly. And I also I don't believe the contention that this won't have any impact on neighbouring residents through noise or general disturbance. I was here this time last year talking about a very similar property elsewhere in the centre of Broadstairs, and the residents are still dealing with this. I don't necessarily have any questions because I just can't see a reason to vote for this.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I agree with what Councillor Garner has mentioned, and sadly have to agree with Councillor Bright on what he's mentioned, which loathes me greatly. I totally get the accommodation. If you can't provide adequate accommodation for the residents in that HMO, where they've got to go and use communal showers, is beyond my belief. I think the number of parking is, again, I think we should really be enforcing the 4 trees first on the previous application before this one came before us, because our green areas are really important to us. I personally knew the person that was sadly killed on that road, and we've mentioned the number of other accidents we've had on that street scene. How many near misses have we not seen or had reported to us that go by? So it's a real concern for safety, and I agree with Councillor Garner, that area is gridlocked all day, every day, and I don't know what these surveyors were watching, but it's not the same street scene that I go through every day and have struggled to get through. So I can't see a way of supporting this application. I could see a way of supporting the original application of 8 2-bedroom flats, which would be more in keeping with the area and would allow parking spaces, etc. But this HMO I'm struggling with on how the impacts both the residents, the neighbours, so I can't agree to this. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor J. Bright.
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. This amount of dwellings in that area is far too many. My main concern is the highways issue. I was at the traffic information drop-in session at Broadstairs Town Council. We had loads of residents come from that area. I've had 2 kids at Dane Court. I know how busy it is in the mornings. That is the time you need to do a traffic survey. It is ridiculous. That amount of dwellings will have extra cars that can't be accommodated around there. It's unsafe. And also, I agree to have rooms without a shower is absolutely inadequate. Thank you.
Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to talk about the building itself, and it can clearly accommodate 20 odd rooms. Normal in a house in multiple occupation, of which I've been in many. The whole point normally of a house in multiple occupations is that you share. and that you share showers, you share bathroom, you share kitchens. There's nothing said about not sharing a kitchen. They're all sharing kitchens, etc. There's one that's got his own kitchen, but the rest would share. But that's just a matter of fact. The other thing is, there's no guarantee that there will just be 20, 22 people in this place. Because they might have partners, they'll have whatever, you know, because you're in an HMO, don't mean to say you can't have a partner, does it? You know, so that they will be living there as well. I don't know what the owner is going to do, because there isn't a management plan per se. So unlike the current home there, it's all managed. And the residents are not likely to go out for a fag on a balcony or wherever it may be, or a sly beer or something. I very much doubt. So I have concerns about this, but the property itself is big enough to hold what they're saying that they want to use it for. I concur with my colleagues here that, you know, my son-in-law and stepdaughter used to live in Fairfield Road, so I know exactly what it's like. And I know exactly what it's like because I'm coming from Margate to Ramsgate on a regular basis, and that's the way I come. And mornings, basically any time, there's a lot of traffic movements. I don't often see a lot of parked vehicles during the day on Fairfield Road, but certainly during the school times there is a massive amount. Not only that, because you've got outside the school, outside Dane Court, you have buses and everything of that nature. So I think overall, I just think it's a step too far. I think that I understand why they made an application for what they want because of its size, but I don't think it's the right place. I think that building could be used for something else. The 8 flats, as it's been mentioned, have got consent for. Great. To have the amount of people who will live there and visit there will far exceed what the current situation is with the home. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Makinson.
Thank you. I'm a bit conflicted by this because it is a huge building and the rooms, apart from the 2 that don't have showers, are good generous sizes. A lot of us have probably lived in HMOs over the years where we've shared kitchens and bathrooms and things. But perhaps there are too many here. But my main point is, where on earth do young people live? If you're a trainee nurse or a trainee teacher, and you can't find one, and if you do, you can't afford the rent on a whole flat, where do you live? Do you stay at home with your parents if they've got room? I mean, I'm vaguely supporting this, but perhaps with a couple of less rooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Well, I am supporting it, and I'll explain why. I don't think it's a particularly desirable development in terms of the number of units on the site, but I totally agree with Councillor Makinson that we do need provision for single people and people who are unable to afford the ever-rising rents in Thanet. I don't attempt to second-guess residents, councillors who know the location better than me in terms of the traffic, but what I do think councillors are in danger of doing is substituting their own judgment about the parking requirement for that from which Mr Livingston referred to as being evidentially based in terms of the requirement on HMOs. When we talk about the rooms may be occupied by multiple people, that's a management issue. It's not a planning issue. So we have to assume that the rooms are going to be used in the way that they're set out before us, and it seems perfectly reasonable to me that some of the facilities are shared. I wouldn't personally care to share facilities, but I accept that some people do have to for financial reasons. So I think that the argument that's being made is that because there is a high-vis issue outside, the overspill from this will make it worse, although nobody as really wants to acknowledge the fact that there are staff coming and going at the moment, which will generate their own traffic movements. I think the challenge is, you can turn this application down, but I don't think it's got a prayer of surviving an appeal, because I don't think that the highways case that's been made by members so far is robust enough, and that's the challenge.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the last two speakers. I know we have to consider the people in the local area. Sorry, but I'm looking at the comment on the report from the Broadstairs Amenity Society. It says they object it would change the character of the prevailing area, which is predominantly for older people. I'm sorry, I don't believe that we can designate an area for older people. We need to attract new people to the area, business people, professional people, and single people. I think this is very well designed. I think that it, as pointed out by a couple of our speakers, it's quite large enough to take the number of people living, that proposed to be living there, and we can't assume that there are going to be more than that. That is a management issue. So I do support the application. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
I've written down some key words: scale, standards, location, highway concerns and access. So I'll just look at the scale first of all. I think it's too big, there's too many rooms. Standards, you know, we're not back in the 1980s where I was a student and I shared a shower facility with 24 other people. You know, we live in a modern world, and we should be providing high quality accommodation for people, and that should include the ability to shower in your own space. You know, there is a place for HMOs, but I think we should be providing a certain standard of facility. I'm really concerned there's no outdoor space. So we've got a large number of people living there, and there's no real outdoor space. It's not as if we're near a park, because I don't think there's any public outdoor space near there either that you could wander to. The location, I think Councillor Matterface would have brought this up. I understand from Councillor Garner that there is a bus route, but the buses are very rarely coming along there. And I think I looked at the distance to the train station. I think it's about a mile, just over a mile, to Broadstairs Broadstairs train station, which is walkable. You can clearly see there is a route through there, and that's the distance I walked to Ramsgate railway station. The highway, I've got the crash map up because I've been working on the Ramsgate HIP with Pat Makinson there, Councillor Makinson, so I've got quite interested in the crash map. It's very interesting, and that road has got a significant number of incidents along it, including a fatality and some serious incidents. So given that Kent Highways have also expressed concern about some highway safety, we should actually heed that warning. I think the original design of flats would have been much more appropriate for that location, although I do agree with the people in here that we are in desperate need of HMOs, but I think they need to be in the right place and of the right standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers? Okay.
Can I just bring up 10% biodiversity net gain?
Mr Livingston wants to come back on something anyway, and we'll come back on that.
So just to come back on the point with regards to crash data, I think in terms of the highway safety point, so what KCC will look at in every application where you're generating additional movements or even just movements on it, that they would look at crash data in the area. I mean, the point that KCC, I suppose, is saying is that the highway safety impact they consider will be dealt with to avoid people parking in areas that they shouldn't park in the access to the site. Obviously, to the point that members have mentioned about parking stress in the area at particular times, well, at those particular times, clearly there is the potential that people will currently be parking in a less safe manner. I mean, we don't need to necessarily know that situation, but any location around a school, I think generally most people will recognise that does happen. That, though, is for a specific time of day, and therefore the question is whether or not it creates an amenity issue in terms of the amount of parking that's generally available on Fairfield Road that would obviously be taken up by potential residents here. So back to the example that's been given before of Luton Avenue, that is exactly the same issue there, even though not ignoring the school point. It was about how much parking is there available in the area, how much does this affect the amenity of everyone to not have a space in anywhere near their house effectively. Because the highway safety issue has specifically been looked at by KCC, and the immediate vicinity of the site has been considered to be okay with the TRO. I do just want to pick up this point that a number of members have mentioned about communal use of showers. There are no standards within the HMO policy that are prescriptive about what should be expected. Normal HMOs, where it is a two-storey property, where we're looking at a C4 HMO, so between 3 and 6 people, unrelated, living together, they will all share a bathroom. To be honest, professional view-wise, for the number of bedrooms that are being provided here, this site, the amount of ensuite facilities that are being provided because of the layout as it was previously used and the amount of showers is actually it's actually good for what it's providing. For the number of bedrooms, the fact that you've only got effectively two rooms on the ground floor that share one shower and 2 rooms on the top floor that also share one shower, that is, I don't think on any metric that any inspector would look at in terms of quality of accommodation, if it existed, which it doesn't, I don't suspect that they would say that this is a refusable reason in terms of living conditions for future residents. But I do accept the fact that the concerns that members have raised relate really to the number of individuals that would be residing here and the ensuing impacts that would have on a number of different factors.
Councillor J. Bright.
Is it possible to ask that Kent Highways do another survey at school times?
So the survey wasn't done by Kent Highways, so they looked at the survey data that was done by the applicant to ratify it effectively and look. So they used the methodology, which is the Lambeth methodology, which looks at particular areas within the vicinity of the site. In terms of requesting additional survey work to be done, potentially, if the motion falls, then it is open to members to decide, effectively what they want to do, whether or not it's to defer it back for further information about various different matters, or to look to refuse it on various different matters. So it's entirely within the gift of members to decide if the motion falls.
Okay, 2 hands together there. I'll take Councillor Garner first.
Thank you. Yeah, just to come back on what 1 or 2 other members have said about my concerns, and I think I'm reflecting what others have said. Don't just reflect to highways. They do reflect to there are other issues around the impact on neighbours, and the trees are a significant one. I think the trees are more significant because we already have a standing condition on this applicant to plant 4 trees in a certain place. So that, I think that carries a little bit more weight. But it isn't just the highways, although the highways is a significant issue. Thank you.
Mr. Livingston.
Sorry, I need to come back on that in terms of what effectively is committed development in terms of what's been granted before. So the 8 flats that were approved to be converted included 10 car parking spaces at the front. So in that decision, which was made after the TPO decision was made, the decision was reached that it was acceptable to have parking in that area rather than 4 trees in that area. So that decision that was made obviously has created a fallback that should be given some weight in the consideration of the application. I think to your point, in terms of the 4 trees and I suppose the non-compliance with the original tree application, I haven't looked into the detail of the application because I'm a bit perplexed by why there are 4 trees being replanted as opposed to the 2, because the 2 were decayed. But obviously the balance here is whatever use comes forward on that building, it's likely to need parking at the front. The question is how much because obviously if you put 4 trees in the area, you will lose a minimum of 3 of those spaces, and then that compromises potentially what you reuse the building for. And there is benefits to reusing that building, rather than potentially, if the care home ceases, in any event, which I don't know if that would be the case, then obviously you could have a vacant building. So it's a balance in this instance. We've considered that if we get a good tree at the front, then that would offset some of the fact that obviously the trees were taken down because they were decayed, obviously. But that is just one of those things that's done on its merits.
Okay, to clarify, So the decision on the trees was made on the 27th of April 2023. That was when the notice was issued anyway. Yeah? So since then, you're saying that there's been a planning application for 10 flats, which has been approved, and then now there's been this planning application for HMO, which is now before us.
I'm just checking the dates because it was the April that the tree application was approved, and I must admit I've done the shorthand from looking at the number, which was the flat number, but I haven't looked at the exact. Oh no, Councillor Garner, you are absolutely spot on. That's oh. Oh yeah, no, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm making lots of mistakes this evening. I do apologise. The flats were approved this year, in February this year, so after the tree application. So as I stated, it was after that tree decision was made. The decision was made that parking at the front was acceptable for the flats. Yes.
Councillor Wing.
So this is a new application that comes after the 10% biodiversity net gain. So, given they don't want to plant these trees or have avoided planting these trees, is there a 10% biodiversity net gain?
So they're not required to, because it's an exempt development, and by virtue of the fact that they're not losing through this application the 25 metres squared that would be required. Obviously they're not doing any extensions to the building, which is the issue. They're converting the existing building, which is the sort of issue, and then therefore on that basis it's down as an exemption to the B&G provisions, which we will be talking about in due course this evening.
Okay, I think at that point, Councillor Moore, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to reaffirm what Councillor Wright said about the another survey, the original survey that's been put forward for consideration was paid by the applicant. And really we should have an independent survey.
So I appreciate the perception. That's every single report that ever comes in on a planning application. That's the point of the consultee, to check whether or not it makes sense or not. In a lot of instances, practitioners that are paid for by the applicants are members of chartered institutes, and therefore they have to give their professional opinion. I accept the perception of it, because that is the perception that certainly I'm sure residents will have. But obviously that's the point of why KCC have to look at it and actually ratify whether or not they consider it to be accurate or not. And obviously KCC haven't spared this, in the sense of they've made it quite clear what they are critical of, but they have resolved that they're not raising any objections to the proposal.
Okay, so now I think we will put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral and delegate to the officers for approval to the vote. Those in favour, please show. And those against? Okay, the motion falls.
Thank you. Apologies for the discussions. In terms of our recommendation and the motion has fallen, given that in this instance there are a number of concerns that have been raised by different parties, and I think it's obviously we've talked a bit about the highways concerns specifically, as well as then issues to do with trees, as well as impact on living conditions. In this instance, I would suggest that the item is deferred to then be brought back to a subsequent planning committee meeting to outline potential reasons for refusal of the application on the matters that members have outlined. That would then give us basically we would go through what's been mentioned and outline whether or not we consider them to be cogent reasons for refusal or not. Specific focus, I think, has to be on the highway safety point, and obviously that gives us an ability to, potentially, obviously, engage with the applicant to see if there is further information possible, or indeed speak to KCC to get further clarification with regards to the points that are raised. But I think ultimately the report that would come back on that basis would be giving members what potentially could be reasons for refusal to consider, given that the motion has fallen.
Density of development.
Oh yes, sorry, and in terms of the impact on neighbouring living conditions, I think that's an important point. In terms of the number of units and whether or not there are further things that could be done, or in the absence of doing those things, they would form a reason for refusal.
Does anyone want to propose a motion to that effect? Councillor Moore, are you proposing? Councillor Bayford seconding? In that case,
Shall I read something out?
I think we'll just get Mr Livingstone to read something out.
So just to confirm then, this is to defer to officers to prepare a report outlining potential reasons for refusal of the application to return to members for decision.
Thank you. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to take a short adjournment. We are later doing this than normal. Please, we normally take around about 7 or 8 minutes. Please try and keep it to that. And then when we return, the Vice Chair will be taking the chair. So just to alert you, that is when that will happen. Thank you.
on that. Can we make a start, please? This is agenda item 5D, application for approval of 31 Dane Crescent, Ramsgate. Speaking under Council Procedure Rule 20.1, Councillor Crittenden, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm not recommending any particular vote on this application, and I have no personal vested interest in the outcome. Given the lack of information in the original application, I believe it appropriate that this committee is able to consider the officer's verbal report as well as the written report. Without the benefit of hearing the officer's verbal report, which you will now have, I would be suggesting consideration is given to a site visit. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden, before you leave, do you have any items you wish to call from the reserve list?
No, but depending on the conclusions of this application, members may want to consider whether to debate item A03 as well, which is at the same property. Thank you.
The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you. So this is the site in this location here. It's a semi-detached property in Dane Crescent. This application is one of 3 retrospective applications that are on the agenda tonight. This application is for retrospective application for the decking to the rear. So this is the property in this location here, and then again from this view here, and then some views that I'll show you from the garden. So this is the block plan that's been submitted. So this is the rear elevation of the property. The single-storey rear extension has previously been approved with the steps that lead down to the garden area. This decking has been installed. Then there's some steps that go down to a lower artificial grass area towards the rear, and then you can see towards the end of the garden is an office area, and there's a bike shed in this location here. So this application is for the decking. You can see some small photos here, which I'll show you sort of closer up ones in a moment, but you can just see that this is showing like a retaining fence in this location here with the steps leading up to the decking. And then again a view here. So closer up views of these. So bottom left there you can see the steps with the fence, which is in this location here. And then you can see on this side here, this is so to the left are the steps coming from the rear extension, so the rear extension steps into the decking, and then the steps leading down to the lower area in this location here. So the site is really on a slope. The garden is all dropping down in level along with all the neighbouring properties along there. So what has happened is in order to try and provide something that's level, the decking has come out from the bottom of the steps. And then obviously the further towards the end of the garden it gets, the deeper the decking gets, because obviously it's trying to be level. So this at this point here, this is almost the original level, but I think this is some artificial grass that's also been added onto the land as well. So I think this is slightly higher than the original level, but you can see in terms of like the decking from this point, it's actually very low in terms of depth. And then this is towards the end of the decking, so you can see by the time it gets here, the decking is 0.45 metres in height above the artificial grass level of this level here. So no one has actually written in objecting to the application, although I understand there is some concerns from an adjacent neighbour, but there's not actually an objection on the file for this one. Obviously, we've been out on site and had a look and stood on the decking. The fencing has been erected along both boundaries. The fencing forms part of a separate application, but for this purposes of this application, the fencing would prevent any overlooking from the decking into the neighbouring properties on both sides. So you can see from the decking point here, the boundary at this point, the original boundary would have been higher, but again, as the ground slopes, the original boundary would have dropped in height, but then that's been increased in height with the new fencing that's been erected along the boundary. So this is just a view looking from that decking area towards the rear of the garden, so really you can get a sense of the change in that ground level across the depth of the garden. So as it stands, the decking itself is not considered to result in overlooking, which is really the main issue of the application, whether there was be overlooking to both neighbouring properties, because of the fact there is the fencing proposed to both sides to an acceptable level that avoid overlooking back towards the neighbouring properties. So the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Please, can I have a seconder? Councillor Everett. Right, we will... Oh, debate. We've got to have debate.
You can choose who to go to first.
Yes, Councillor Orban.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. Because the garden slopes, has the land level been raised and then the decking put on top of a raised land level? Because obviously I think if they flatten that out, if they flatten that slope out, then that would be, the size of that would be engineering works in itself. So do you know whether that's actually happened or not?
I'm going to come back on this one. My understanding is that the land level has changed quite a lot over time, so it's not just been a more immediate thing with the decking that's occurred because of the drop away that does occur. So I think the decking is on top of what is a changed land level, but more than 4 years ago. So the engineering operations have sort of mounted up over the period of time. But obviously, as Emma's outlined, obviously the decking as it is now with the structures that are present, you don't result in the overlooking. I think there's also some other issues that have been looked at, you know, in terms of how the land drops away in the other applications. But for this one on its own, yeah, the land level has been changed.
Yes, Councillor Orban.
So, because they've now got that decking on raised levels, so they put the monolith of a fence up. The height of it is 2.7 or something, was it? 2.7?
Well, the height of the fence varies across the length of the garden, but yeah, next to the actual decking area, it's 1.95 on one side, and it's 2.7 on the other. So on the side that we're looking at here, this side is the 1.95, and then on the right-hand side, I don't...
So I'm guessing then, obviously, that...
Yeah, there, sorry, here you can see it. So that fence there is 2.7.
Yeah, oh, it's massive, isn't it? Yeah. So does that... I know we're getting onto the fence, but it's all part and parcel. I just wanted to know whether where the sun is with that, whether that affects the neighbours' use of their garden with light being cut out, sunlight being cut down. because of that, the height of that fencing.
It's not relevant for the decking. If you want to talk about it, you know what to do.
So wait for the fence.
If you want to call it.
Yeah, okay. I note that there obviously that there isn't any objection to this application. So as it stands with that, I can't see why we would refuse that with no objection from the neighbour who is affected. Thank you.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. Just say it looks, don't look too bad at all. Obviously, they can't discuss the fence now, but there's trees behind that. I don't think there's no reason to not reject the application.
Councillor Keane.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to have some comment from you about the water drainage, whether the changes affect that at all, because that was mentioned in the call-in.
I'm just double checking. Give me 1 second. I believe I have an email with regards to this that provides a bit more information. So give me 1 second. Is there anything else? Reports? Okay, so so the drainage of the site, because of the level change, there are stones, I believe, between the outbuilding. It might be on the plan actually. So, well, what the officer has said, I'm going to read it verbatim, is that. The artificial grass has been laid across the former decking that is in turn above a stone gravel base. I was able to see a patch of ground that wasn't covered by either the decking or grass to confirm the base level. The rainwater runs through the grass and through the decking and then onto the gravel and stones. So there is a drainage system effectively to get down. It's not entirely covered, which is the main concern, so it doesn't result in runoff outside of the site.
Nobody else? No. We will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Those in favour? Right. Any against? I can't see any abstentions. No. Thank you. Oh, the motion is carried. Then we move on to... I've got the wrong page. 7. So we've got the mother. Right. Oh, yes. That concludes the public speaking for this. Right. Now, this gets complicated here. Councillors Everett, Alban, Kay Bright and Keane will now leave for the next item, which is the reserve list. Before you leave, do you have any items you wish to call for the reserve which you have not already declared an interest in? Councillor Everett.
5J, please.
Sorry, we didn't mention Councillor J. Bright as well. I'm afraid you have to leave as well. Sorry, we didn't mention your name.
Thank you. I will now call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads?
AO2 31 Dane Crescent Ramsgate, AO3 31 Dane Crescent Ramsgate, AO5 Old Convent Farmhouse Reading Street Broadstairs, AO6 Cliff Lift Queen's Promenade Margate, and AO7 Larborough Court Sussex Street Ramsgate.
Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Rattigan and what? Councillor Boyd. I couldn't remember his name. Do members agree? Agreed. Thank you. Oh, and they can come back in. Yeah, sorry, this bit's a bit complicated for my simple brain.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you. My first item on this agenda for this moment in time is to say that we have now reached 10 o'clock. The Planning Applications Manager and I agree that as we only have one item left, there is a good chance that we will be able to finish the meeting by 11:30. However, we are not necessarily likely to be able to finish by 10:30. In accordance with the Constitution, we have to agree whether or not we are willing to go beyond 10:30. Members who were in the room for the meeting last month may recall that we had to do this then. So I'm going to propose that we extend the time of the meeting from 10:30 to 11:30 to enable us to finish the remaining item on the agenda. There is only one item on the agenda. Would the Vice Chair please second?
You just have to second it.
Seconded.
Would those in favour of continuing with the meeting please indicate? And anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. So, I've lost my paperwork. Thank you. Right, next item on the agenda is D10 Flambeau Europlast Limited. We have no speakers on this item. The Planning Applications Manager will now outline the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is an outline application for 118 dwellings, including access, following demolition of the building. The main considerations are the principal development, character and appearance of the area, living conditions, highways, planning obligations, biodiversity, everything. So in terms of the site itself, this is an aerial view of the Flambeau building and the site, which wraps with a sort of additional rectangle round the Tesco's car park on Manston Road in Ramsgate. So this is the site outlined in red. I'll talk about why part of the site looks like it's been excluded next to the railway line in a bit, but you can see it covers the extent of the building as well as the area to the west. So this is a view from Manston Road looking towards the access to Flambeau itself. So the proposal is to reuse this access, make some alterations to it, and to change where this pedestrian island is. So to move it a bit this way towards the photo to ensure there's adequate turning for vehicles going in and out of that access. This is the exact junction at the moment. So there's parking on site for Flambeau Europlast. And then this is looking back towards the building itself. So two-storey, with the majority of it being a very high single-storey warehouse building and factory. So you go see from an isometric view the extent of land that is taken up by the Flambeau building. And you can see the railway line behind. And then this is showing the back of the site, including this area here, which is part of the site. And then the railway line as well. And you can see a number of buildings here. These are network rail buildings. That's why that part of the site has been excluded. And I'll show you that any proposal will include access to those buildings, which is required over this land by network rail. So the site is allocated in the in the Thanet local plan under policy H01 for housing development. It also includes, there's an area that's outside of the current application site, which is actually to the rear of the Tesco car park, which is actually at a different level to this site, because there's a change in level around where the mouse pointer is. But this is the allocation which encompasses the whole of the red line that's been put forward. Previous permission was granted was actually granted around 2017, but the application came in 2015 for 120 dwellings, again an outline application including access. So in that application they provided illustrative plans showing a potential layout of how the site might come forward to provide the number of dwellings proposed. The current proposal has a very, very similar layout but has two less units. As you can see, it's slightly changed at the access in terms of how it may come forward, because they are trying to reuse the existing access rather than move the access, which is what the previous application did. So the form of development that you're seeing in front of you is showing how the site could come forward for 118 dwellings. The mix that's shown on the illustrative layout includes 42 flats and 76 dwellings, although that is subject to change. This is, as I say, it's outline application, so it could be provided in a different form. That would all be a case to look at for the reserved matters. So I mentioned about an access to that would would be expected to be provided to the network of rail facilities, which is, shown in this location here, but again, this is not for consideration now, but they've just shown how you could achieve an access. They are also proposing an emergency access as part of the access arrangements in this location further down Manston Road. Now, the reason that's been provided is because of requirements for the number of dwellings, and from Highways perspective, it's proposed this is emergency only, and there is a condition that would require that that's put on the outline because access is under consideration. You can see the areas around the site which are left for open space and landscaping, which we will look at in a minute. But first, we're going to look at just the access to the site. So, first instance, the application's come in and provided details with the transport assessment of how the access is going to be acceptable from safety standards, which proposed that the traffic island would relocate slightly to allow for better turning in and out of that access. Obviously, turning of very large vehicles occurs right now. This is a working factory for the creation of plastic products, so it's very much used at the moment. However, obviously, to ensure it's a safe access, that pedestrian island was proposed to be moved. Further work, though, has been done following consultation with Highways, and there is a road safety audit which has taken place on that access, which has resulted in a few further changes, including a widening of the right turn lane into the site, because there's a right-hand turn lane there at the moment, as well as just a bit more refinement about what needs to go on that pedestrian island in terms of the bollard, the lighting, the keep left illumination, etc. The visibility that's been shown is acceptable for both 30 mile an hour and 40 mile an hour limits in terms of the visibility all the way. It is at a very straight point in the road, so the visibility is considered to be safe as long as the safeguarding condition is put on, which requires no obstruction within those splays. So in terms of the illustrative way the site may come forward, this is just an indication showing how the site could come forward, including, as mentioned, the fire access, which is down as B, the main road coming into the site with a roundabout in the centre. That's obviously the way you get the spokes coming out to then get the number of dwellings that the site has been allocated for running down the site, whilst keeping some of the landscaping that's already in existence at the moment on the site, and indeed the boundaries to both the neighbouring properties across the railway line and also the boundaries to the Tesco car park. So this has shown a potential mix which predominantly is 3-bed dwellings, but again, this isn't being fixed at this stage. We are that's something that is looked at in the reserve matters, so there would be a consideration about whether or not it provides the housing that's needed in terms of the strategic housing market assessment at reserve matters stage. But in terms of the scale of dwellings that would be expected to be able to accommodate the number that's put forward, this does include areas of 3-storey development. The proposal follows the idea that was put forward in the 2015 application to have the focal point around the roundabout to be the higher density area in terms of being 3-storey, and then with 3-storey development on the eastern part of the site. Manston Road, for those that don't know, increases in height to go over the railway line, and therefore the land level in this area where A is a lot lower than the road at that point, and therefore it is considered that in the future there would be potential to put a 3-storey building there. Similarly, a development on the western end of the site, the land level is lower than the adjacent industrial units, and also the Tesco's development, which is around here. So again, it can accommodate a 3-storey part of development on that part of the site. There have been some illustrative elevations that have been provided of, again, how the site may come forward, but I'm going to skip through these because they are just that. They are illustrative, and this will be a matter that will be looked at in the reserve matters. But again, it identifies that in terms of the number of units, we do think that can be accommodated on site, providing a successful and high quality design. In terms of boundary landscaping, so whilst landscaping is a reserved matter, there are matters that need to be considered at this stage, given the work that's been done in terms of preliminary assessment with regards to ecology, and also because of biodiversity net gain requirements. So speaking specifically to do with ecology, concern has been raised through the preliminary assessment that's been submitted about the presence of reptiles on the site. There have been areas which have been recorded where common lizards have been recorded, the 5 locations that are circled in pink. So what has been proposed is a reptile mitigation strategy has been submitted. In terms of the hierarchy of how you mitigate the impact on protected species, especially when it comes to an allocated housing site, the first port of call is to look to whether or not you can mitigate it and actually keep effectively an area on site for reptiles, and that is what they have proposed to do. So in this area at the western extent of the site, to the northern part, they are proposing specific grassland as well as various log piles to be installed, as well as there being a safeguarding condition requiring further information about these measures to come forward as part of the reserve matters. So there is considered by KCC Ecology that this provision would be acceptable to mitigate the impact of the presence of reptiles across the site. So they'd be translocated there, but the methodology specifically would be something that would be subject to the conditions that have been put on the site. In addition to that, though, are the requirements about biodiversity net gain. So we've done the training on this. This is the statutory requirement for 10% above the baseline on the site. So this plan was submitted with the metric that was submitted by a qualified ecologist, which looked at the existing value of the site in ecological terms, in terms of the scrub growth, any grass that's there, equated it to a number of units, and then has to show how they could accommodate for a 10% increase in that specific type of habitat unit on the site, and that has then gone off to KCC to judge whether or not it would provide the likelihood that 10% can be provided on site. So within the submission, they have proposed that large areas in the edges of the site are to be retained and created with planting of moderate condition for mixed scrub. At the moment, it's just dense scrub. It is whatever is there. Whereas it requires detailed planting to basically provide a higher value. So there's less of it, but at a higher value with native species that could potentially support other habitat and wildlife. So this has been provided. Now, there are a number of conditions that are proposed on the application. I haven't written the numbers down, but they're in the 20s, which outline basically some of the requirements for net gain. One of the key fundamentals, though, is that there are a number of informatives that we've put forward, which outline how, under the Planning Act, there is now a requirement that any application which is not exempt that gets permission is required prior to the commencement of development to submit a biodiversity net gain plan to the local authority, irrespective of whether or not there's a condition on or not. That has to come in to us. We would then look at the precise detail of what has been shown. The conditions, though, that we have proposed to put on the application include condition 26, which basically says that that plan that has to come in has to accord with what you're looking at here. So what they've already submitted to us, they're not going to do anything different because KCC say this is acceptable. They have to accord with this. There is also a condition that we are proposing, which is to require a habitat management and monitoring plan to be required. So this is another part of the provision within the net gain stuff in the Environment Act. And this is when it's considered that there's significant on-site provision being created, that they need to provide details of who is going to maintain this area for 30 years following completion, giving us the details of that, how they're going to plant stuff, and what their management, as I say, and monitoring measures are going to be. So that is, again, another requirement, something that has to come in. And there are the conditions at the start of the conditions list, which is basically saying anything within the reserve matters application that comes forward that has to show the landscaping, that landscaping has to accord with this and all of those other things. So that all of those things, there shouldn't be any conflict, basically, in what is coming forward. So in terms of other parts of the development that's worth noting, you'll see that there is an appended viability assessment that's provided. Now, the 2015 application came back to members in 2017, and members agreed to secure £100,000 following a viability assessment, which has put 50 grand was put towards the SAMS contribution, and £50,000 was put towards affordable housing. In this instance, the submission of a viability assessment has come in on the basis of contributions that have been requested by consultees. So these are outlined in the heads of terms in here. However, they are providing for approximately, I think it's 1.1 million in total across primary education, library services, social care, waste, and then there is 80,000 that's being put forward towards the Wall Recreation Ground. So you may know, if you've read the viability appraisal, you've all read the viability appraisal, it has, at the end of it, it makes very clear that there's a discrepancy in planning obligations. So it says that the model has been done on the basis of contributions of 1.1 million, but actually what we had outlined had been asked for without any contributions to TDC was about 860 something thousand. Now, in that instance, the gap, the applicants said that they were willing to effectively have 1.1 million of contributions. So, in terms of looking at that gap and the what effectively is £230,000, we've obviously talked to the public sector housing team and also talked to the open spaces team. The site is allocated for 120 units. They're providing 118. There isn't the space on the site to provide an equipped play area, and there are 2 equipped play areas in close vicinity of the site. One at Princess Margaret Avenue and one at the War Rec. So the open spaces team have recommended in this instance that the contribution goes to the War Rec, because there is already contributions going towards the Princess Margaret Avenue that have been secured through housing developments in Newington. So that's the 80,000. In terms of the contribution towards affordable housing, that's 150,000. So there is an increase above, obviously, what was contributed in 2017. The reason behind the fact that this site is not supporting 30% on site fundamentally comes down to the value of the site. So the viability assessment outlines how the benchmark land value, how much the site would sell for if it was a commercial property as it is now. Whilst this is disputed, the applicant says it should be, I think, 5.5 million, and Dixon Searlers, our consultants, say it should be about 3.5 million actually. That is a significant amount of money in comparison to if we were on agricultural land in terms of the amount, because brownfield sites are valued higher. And what that means is that there needs to be more money needs to be made to offset that value in terms of viability. There are also remediation costs. Demolition of the building, asbestos, soft stripping of land. There was a concern that the land was significantly contaminated previously. However, that has now not actually been shown to be the case. However, there is still about 2.2 million that needs to be spent to demolish the site, clear it up, and sort out various landscaping factors. And again, that all adds on to the cost. And unfortunately, this is one of the realities of developing brownfield sites, that these costs do incur. So in this instance, we do think from the evidence that's been provided, the terms of policy SP23 have been satisfied in terms of that it's been proven that it would not be viable with 30% on site. And therefore, on the basis of the contributions that have been put forward and the safeguarding conditions, it's recommended to defer and delegate for approval to officers subject to submission of a legal agreement securing the heads of terms and safeguarding conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Speakers, Councillor Everett.
Thank you for the presentation, Ian. I don't really understand why, if we're only considering the access at the moment, we also at the moment need to consider the contributions. And obviously, I've read the viability assessment, and it does talk about the potential for the market to move and assumptions that have been made in the course of that. So that's one question. I do accept that, based on the figures that have been provided, it's very difficult for them to provide affordable housing on site, much as we would like it. I think also we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're endlessly being told we should develop on brownfield sites. Well, here's a brownfield site, so let's understand that because it's a brownfield site, there are some challenges that come with that, which in this case is the existing use value. So I'd like to understand that. My other point really is the 80,000 contribution to the War Rec. Well, obviously I know the War Rec, and I also know the Princess Margaret play area, and I'm aware that there is funding for the Princess Margaret play area. I don't think realistically anybody living on that site with small children is going to go to the War Rec. I think they're all going to go to the Princess Margaret play area. Not least because they're quite likely to attend the primary school across the road, and the Princess Margaret play area is adjacent to it. So I would have preferred to see recognition that some of that money might be spent at the Princess Margaret Avenue. Not a definitive statement of it, but I think it should be. I think consideration should be allowed for that in the condition, in the decision. Not least because by the time these things are put up, although there's 40 or 50,000 to be spent at Princess Margaret Avenue, who knows what the position will be by the time that the council actually gets this money. So that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of consideration of access and dealing with planning obligations now, so because it's an outline application, members would be approving the principle of developing the site for 118 dwellings. And because it's that number, the consideration that always occurs for an outline is how, what do you need to contribute to mitigate the number of dwellings rather than the detail of those dwellings particularly. Now, what we would normally do for, say, contributions which are linked to the number of bedrooms, for example, we don't know the number of bedrooms, so the legal agreement would outline, a sliding scale potentially, depending on what the number of bedrooms that actually come forward in the reserve matters. But it's because the application for an outline permission is a planning permission. The reserve matters is was a bolt on to that planning permission, and therefore it's always been the case that Section 106 agreements can only be found and added to outline applications. To your point about the wall rec, I do agree, and I think there is a point here that actually we obviously secure planning obligations and things do change. The point needs to be that to ensure that we're according with the community infrastructure levy regulations, we need to ensure that we're identifying a particular project that the money goes towards for it to be lawful that we're securing it. However, and at this point in time, obviously, the Open Spaces Manager said, yes, it should go to the wall rec. The two things I would say about that is, I think that we would be able and quite happy without having to formally amend any motion in terms of the heads of terms to be able to outline that actually in the wording of the legal agreement it says the wall rec or a recreation ground in the nearby vicinity of the site. I don't think that's not a stretch that I think we need to do an amendment to the motion on. But in addition, there is a condition which will require a local area of play on the site, and there is a bit of open space that I'm sort of circling with the mouse now. Specifically, that local area of play for the site, the aim should be for a site really of this sort of size, you should have some very small facilities for really preschoolers. So anything above a school, you would be going to those two, Princess Margaret or otherwise, but there should be some things and some equipment there. So that's what there's a requirement for the reserve matters to show that as a local area of play. But I take the point, and I think the flexibility should be needed and built in.
Councillor Wing.
I mean, it's brownfield site, so we should be welcoming the fact we're building on a brownfield site. But I'm assuming the factory's still open, so it's sad that there will be some job losses. So we mustn't forget that jobs will be lost. Are they moving? Yeah, but that's okay then. I don't think it's a time or place to be squabbling over the 80k, because I'd actually like to see that 80k in the war rec, because I think we've got a desperate need for facilities for older kids, 12 upwards. We don't have those facilities anywhere, and although facilities for all our young people are not great, for older kids 12 plus, there is no facilities or very poor facilities, outdoor facilities, that they would wander a further distance to. I also think we should be considering adult playgrounds as well. We desperately need to keep a lot of our adults fit. We don't have... I don't think we've got an outdoor gym anywhere, so we need to be thinking well and truly outside the box in terms of the 80k, but that's further down the line. It looks a great development. I am a bit upset that there's no social housing on there, because obviously we've got a desperate need for social housing, but I understand the reasons why.
Councillor Moore.
No, sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, thank you. In that case, it's Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions and points. So the access, just looking at that, there is one access to this site, isn't there? And everything else within that site is for reserve matters, i.e. emergency vehicle and refuse vehicle getting in and then turning around and getting out after they've been up and down each of those roads. I assume that's the case. And the other question I have, I know this is very close to another application alongside that to for a potential drive-through restaurant, and might or might not be access to that from the road here out onto the, because I know it could be built there, couldn't it? So I'm just trying to confirm that that wouldn't be the case, because we wouldn't want vehicles visiting a potential proposed drive-through coming in on and out of this housing area. Well, if you answer that, and then I'll make my other point.
Thank you. So yes, the 30-metre refuse vehicle has been modelled on just the access, not the internal layout. That would be something that would, as you say, would be dealt with at reserve matters. So in terms of the area that you're mentioning with regards to a separate application, which is effectively this grassed area that I'm circling here, there's no proposal to put an access through to there. It's also not feasible because of a level change. So there's no, I mean, also you would go directly through the reptile receptor area as well now. So, you know, there are all sorts of safeguards that basically mean there won't be an access through this site to that site.
Yeah, the other point I wanted to make is about, of course, zero affordable housing itself on the site is not at all a positive thing. It's a very negative thing. There's a real clash, really, between we want to build on brownfield sites, but that obviously costs more, so we can't get affordable housing. I guess that's because at the moment, as a country, we're relying on developers to provide, private developers to provide affordable housing rather than central government providing funding to be able to build on these sites and build in affordable council houses. So without wishing to veer off the subject of the application itself, let's hope that's something that the new government will deal with in a few weeks at the budget. Thank you.
Councillor Everett.
Point of information for Councillor Wing, there's an outdoor gym in Cliff's End. Yeah, I don't think many people from this development would be using it, but it's in Cliff's End.
Does anyone else have any other questions or comments to make? In that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral to officers for approval to the vote. Those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you. In which point I get to say this concludes the business for this meeting, and thank you for your attendance and good night. And we did just make it within the 10:30.